good morning to you all. First thing first, thank you so much for all your energy and time on this. Much appreciated. So this is a very specific 2-day session on Bentley's pilot iTwin platform. So before that, I thought I would just quickly give you an introduction about Bentley because what we do and what's our unique value, and then a little more about Bentley education, and then I will introduce the two heroes of the show today for the day. So and then they will get it rolling. So Bentley Education, we've been working with RMIT and other universities extensively. We'll talk about Bentley Education later, but then first is about who's Bentley. So let me take you through quickly a video rather than me talking about who's Bentley. So that gives you an idea of
Wonderful.
now.
There we go. Yes, that's great.
Around the world, engineers and architects, constructors and owner-operators are using Bentley's software solutions to design, build and operate the infrastructure that sustains our economy and our environment. Together, we are advancing infrastructure.
Bentley software has helped us deliver a successful Crossrail. Together with Bentley, Crossrail have created the Information Academy. It's about creating an environment for people to work together really much more efficiently and effectively than they've ever done before.
It is the front of house for our Emirates. So we wanted to do something spectacular, something iconic, something everybody will remember.
We chose Bentley. There are not many competitors who could do a project on this scale.
We wanted to use technology, digital technology, to do it in the best possible way. For this, we use Bentley software.
We're very proud of the association with Bentley Sachs. It's allowed us to be a leader in the industry.
And more important is, the Bentley management has worked with us to help us feel that comfort to work with Bentley. And that is what is driving us.
On.
Bentley, advancing infrastructure.
And I know majority of your students here, the reason why Bentley custom, I've talked to you about who Bentley, because there are very few companies which can actually create engineering infrastructure in every vertical space and every horizontal space. What I mean, every vertical space is, if you look at it, in a city, if you look at it, if you look at the city, that you have building, so everything to do with building. You have rail and transit, which are needed there. In fact, Dave is one of an expert in that industry. We have a complete, very industry specific rail and transit. Shuttle is also running a course on linear infrastructure in a university, right? Then we have plans, process plans. We have utilities and power plants. Then utility network and then university campuses. So literally water and wastewater. So for a student, if you're trying to make a career out of engineering in any of this field, Bentley has a complete solution that is vertically. Horizontally, if you look at the whole life cycle of an infrastructure, there are few companies which can actually, all these vertical industries, horizontally starting from surveying to concept design to analysis to construction, and then to hand it over to operation. We have solutions that can actually take care of every part of the operation. No wonder we are possibly, touching the lives of 8 of the top 10 engineering firms, and then most of the government within Australia and around the world. And for a student, this gives you a whole basket of what you want to do. If you're very passionate about water, you can get into water. If you're passionate about rail, you can get into rail. If you're passionate about building, you can get into building. So that's the reason Bentley why, and then iTwin platform is going to be the other one. I don't want to take the thunder away. You will get to know about iTwin platform, why iTwin platform. Dave and Ron will take care of that. And then Bentley Education, which is your part of for the education industry, is that Bentley has a very strong vision about creating future engineers, solving the industry industry's problem with the student community and learning community. And all of this, what's the value proposition? Have a look at it.
This is infrastructure. And this. But so is this. It's here. It's way out there. It's everywhere. And it's essential. Definitely essential. Infrastructure works hard, and so do the millions of people who make it work. Not sitting in an office all day plugging away on a spreadsheet until your eyes pop out of your head hard. No, these jobs are different. These jobs use your whole brain. Jobs that take you to the far reaches of the world. Jobs that change the world. But how do you get in on this? So glad you asked. We are Bentley Systems, the infrastructure engineering software company. Our software builds all that stuff. Were you expecting a protractor? Hang on to that. This is Bentley Education. It's an online platform built to connect you to the infrastructure world. It's got everything you need to begin a career in infrastructure and the tools to make it happen. Here's a breakdown. Complete access to the software that the pros use. A network of industry professionals, plus bonus resources, news, travel opportunities. You guessed it, all at no cost. Bentley Education is giving you the tools and hands-on training to help you navigate the real world and make your mark in it. So click the link below, give us some quick info, and prove you're not a robot. In just a few clicks, your journey begins. Join us and build yourself a new world.
That's about Bentley Education. I think quickly I will take you through what are the value proposition is about. Is that one of the mission statement what we're looking at is the infrastructure industry is growing. You know, the highest amount of money that is government spends on GDP is today the infrastructure. If you list out the top 10 projects and where the money the government is spending on, at least about 7 or 8 of them are roads and rails and infrastructure. So Bentley Education is all about trying to create a set of future professionals who are industry skilled, who are job ready skilled to be created on, and that's the mission what we are. And today's session is all about that. Today's and tomorrow's session is about equipping you with what is the digital twin, where does it go in the infrastructure industry, how does the iTwin platform work on, and how do you giving you a hands-on practice on that so that when you enter the session, either you become curious to dive deeper or you're adequately knowledge to take the next step. So that's the whole idea about that. So mission statement is create world-class talent by helping all students improve quality of life, positively change the world. But what do we do on that is about 4 value proposition. We give you free access to over, in fact, it was 40 before, it is now 50 Bentley applications, completely free access. And these are the software which are used by the industry people. So there is no 2 versions of industry uses a much more powerful software and then the academia uses a much lesser powerful software. No, we want you to be trained on what exactly the industry you are going to get into be using across. Okay, I always used to say, if I can give you a car free, but then if I don't tell you how to drive it, if you don't know how to learn, teach you how to drive it, then it's not of no use at all. Same way here, we give you a software and then also give you a whole self-learning, self-paced learning resources. Not self alone. Today's session is one of those examples again. We also have industry experts hand-holding and training on. So we give you the tool, we tell you what are the best practices on that, and we also go hands-on training onto that. And then we want you to be sharing your knowledge with your student and educator, forming a community. And these are the 4 clear value propositions what Bentley Education brings across. There are some very, very clear success stories, but then I really don't want to take your time on talking you through that. I can possibly give you more time to be learning what you want to be learning on. So let me now quickly take you to the introduction. Now give me a minute. Okay. Now today's session is going to be held by to be conducted by 2 eminent industry experts from there. First, let me introduce Dave Body to you. Dave Body is a senior industry strategy manager, very, very strongly specializing on design engineering. He has been with Bentley for, he started in Bentley about 2001, and we're talking about 21 years with Bentley in multiple capabilities, very, very, very strongly into mining industry. He brings in tremendous amount of expertise in mining industry, and he also has that unique experience and expertise of working with the industry before moving into the tool vendor. So Day1 would be actually taking you through today about what are the thinking on digital twin, what are the importance of digital and evolution of digitalization within the industry today, and then give you a quick introduction of such a success story so that you get to understand what is the relevance of it. Followed by Ron Sidler. Ron is again a very, very strong IT professional with a very strong infrastructure industry experience. He brings a tremendous amount of tremendous number of years of experience on oil and gas industry. And today he's one of those very, very few resources who absolutely know inside out of iTwin as a platform in Asia Pacific. So Ron would be taking you through about the whole of the tool, handhold you, and then train you onto that. And the end of the second day tomorrow, you would be as good as what an iTwin platform learner would be on. So over to you, Dave.
Great, thanks, Sri. Morning, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me. Thumbs up if you can. Let me share my screen. You've made me nervous too, Sri. I'm going to try and share my screen here.
You can do it then, me, Matt. Don't worry.
Make sure I share the right one. Just bring that across in there.
Can't do a thumbs up on this one.
Okay, no worries. Okay. Yeah, so again, welcome everyone. My name's Dave Boddy, and as Sri mentioned, I am the Senior Industry Strategy Manager for Civil Infrastructure here in ANZ. So I have been with Bentley for a while. I was actually with a company called Geopack, who was acquired by Bentley in 2001. So prior to that, I was actually working for Geopack Corporation from 1995. So I've been in the Bentley system for a few years now, as has Ron. I think we probably joined at around about the same time, actually. So we've both been in the Bentley system for quite some time. So what I would like to do today is I would like to just frame it up for Ron, really. Spend half an hour talking about the digital data evolution that we're seeing today within our industry. But I also want to just look back a little and give a little bit of a history lesson as well. Talk about some of my experiences within the industry and how that could translate into the next generation, i.e. you guys, and what opportunities may be present for you moving forward throughout your career. So let me just go through, and first up, I just want to share this quote from a gentleman called Klaus Schwab, who is actually the founder of the World Economic Forum, and this quote is attributed to him back in 2016. And I've highlighted the paragraph there that, or the sentence there that I think is really quite important. So back in 2016, he was highlighting the beginnings of what he describes as a new technological revolution. And he predicted that this revolution will alter the way we live, work, and relate to one another. And that's definitely happened within the social media context, but also within many industries, including our industry, the civil construction industry. And he noted that it'll be nothing like we've ever seen or experienced previously. And really what he was doing, he was predicting what we describe now as the fourth industrial revolution, which is obviously preceded by the first, second, and third. And we've got to go ways back for the first industrial revolution, back towards the late 1700s, early 1800s, where the use of water and steam power was used to mechanise production and transportation. And then the second industrial revolution, use of electric power to create mass production and assist transportation. And then the third industrial revolution, which is electronics and IT, to automate production and even further advance transportation. Now, the fourth industrial revolution, now some are saying it's just really a continuance of the third industrial revolution, but Due to the speed of current breakthroughs, there really is no historical precedent we can compare that against. During this fourth industrial revolution, we're evolving at a exponential rate rather than a linear rate. And it is disrupting almost every industry, including our industry, and every country where this is occurring. So this is another way to look at it along this timeline. Now, my kids reckon I was at the start of the first industrial revolution. I can assure you I wasn't, but I was there for the start of the third industrial revolution. Now, it was over 40 years ago that I actually began my studies in civil engineering and engineering surveying. And even though computers were in use in large organisation and large government departments, they weren't part of everyday life, and they weren't even prevalent in working day life. I recall learning in my studies back in the early 80s the concept of measuring distance with a survey chain, which is really just a long wire rope. And we were introduced into this new fandangled instrument called a EDM, or electronics distance measuring system. But like computers, these were the domain of really large government survey departments, or those really large surveying organisations who could justify the cost of such breaking instrumentation. But in my first job within the road construction industry in the early to mid 80s, I was working up in the Kimberley region in Western Australia, and there was no sign of these. It was a bunch of stakes, survey chain, and a sledgehammer. And even in the mid 80s, when I got back to Perth, where I was employed as a junior designer and drafter for this little company called Bunnings, you might have heard of them. PCs weren't available. So I was actually there designing and drafting engineering roof trusses, but there was no PCs. Everything was done on a drafting board, a calculator and a drafting board. But as the 80s dragged on, the advent of the PC was a real game changer for our industry. So for engineers and surveyors who could access, you're going to laugh, but this was high-powered computing capabilities, and we had it at our fingertips. Now, my first experience with the PC was when I was working in Canberra for a survey consultancy, and we actually shared a PC with a separate civil engineering consultancy who had their offices across the road. So we used to timeshare the computer back in the 80s. And to tell you the truth, as a young engineer and surveyor just starting out in my career, I found myself in the right place at the right time. I was also pretty keen and eager, and I could really see the benefits this third industrial revolution could have. And I was really determined to fully embrace and leverage the technology and processes that really did add value and efficiencies to our workflows and to our industry. Now, at first, many of my managers and those of the older generation, they were more circumspect with this revolution, and it really took them a lot longer to identify the benefits. But this is really a classic change management scenario where, those senior engineers and surveyors felt their experience and knowledge was fast being replaced by, a black box with software and workflows they were completely unfamiliar with. But this change also brought, plenty of opportunities. And for me, I was so determined to ride that wave of this latest revolution all the way into the beach. Now, for me, it's going to take me such a long time to paddle back out to ride the next wave in. But if you're a young engineer just starting out in your career, I reckon you're going to find yourself in the right place at the right time to take full advantage of the fourth industrial revolution. Now, the video that I've got on screen now is actually a computer-generated depiction of a beach scene. So this really does represent, the blurring of the physical and the digital. And when Klaus was talking about, the blurring the lines between the physical and the digital, he was actually describing what we know today as a digital twin. Now, if you were to go and Google the definition of a digital twin, you would get over 50 million hits. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go directly to Wikipedia, which is a fairly good description of what a digital twin is. And it is a virtual representation that serves as the real-time digital counterpart of a physical object or process. And when we talk about infrastructure, we can see that Bentley Systems describes the digital twin in a very similar way. But we like to emphasize that digital twin is across the entire life cycle of an asset. So whether that's a piece of road, or it's a bridge, or it's a tunnel, etc. It's about the complete life cycle of that particular asset. So I often get asked, Dave, what's the difference between a BIM model and a digital twin? So in short, a BIM model is actually a static view at a certain point in time of the proposed asset, whereas a digital twin is a living virtual representation of the asset over the span of its entire life cycle. So if we were to use this bridge as an example, so this is a new bridge being designed in Italy, we may start with a BIM model. However, over time, digital data are associated with its, whether it's construction, its performance, and its condition during the operation and maintenance phase. Information and data will be continuously captured and updated over the life of the asset. So the original BIM model could act as a portal or a link into this additional digital data, therefore allowing the BIM model to be the first step toward a digital twin. But a BIM model is not the only way a digital twin can be formed. So if we were to think about our transportation-based infrastructure as it stands today, I would probably guess that more than 90% of this has been developed prior to the last 10 years or so. Now, that being the case, there really isn't a great level of BIM models for these assets that are available today. So the question is, how can we create a virtual representation of these physical assets? So one quick and cost-effective method is to create a reality model of the asset. So in this example, we have a reality mesh of the Coffs Harbour region in New South Wales there. And within this area, there are a number of critical assets, such as this bridge. So what we can do is we can discretely identify the reality mesh components that make up this bridge. And we can use this as a portal or link into a raft of digital data, including maintenance-based data, such as inspection-related data. And what we can do is we can review this data as part of the digital twin and drill into the details of these inspections. Therefore, and as shown, not all digital data needs to be residing inside the actual BIM model. However, the ability to link to other data and databases through this type of workflow ensures the digital twin remains what we call and describe as evergreen, with data continually added to the asset over the life of the asset. And if we were to look at how a digital twin could be leveraged within an operational workflow, let's take a look at this particular scenario. So this is a proof of concept where we're highlighting the use of IoT sensors and the digital model within a client's operational process. So this provides real-time, or let's call it near real-time feedback to the operator of the assets. So in this example, we're leveraging the as-built model and are associating sensors with critical assets such as the bridges, and in this case, the tunnel here. Now, if all sensors are running within the determined tolerances, the sensors will be green, along with the actual asset, in this case, the tunnel. Information is read in that near real time, and when the thresholds reach the upper limits, the sensors and the asset will actually turn yellow. Now, in this example, what I'm going to do is force an alert due to a sensor breaching its upper tolerance. Now, the operator is automatically notified, and he can then investigate the issue associated with the tunnel in question. Now, as shown, the sensors have turned red, as has the tunnel, and we can see the CO and the NO2 levels of updating above the acceptable tolerance. Now, upon further investigation, the operator can see there's actually been a truck jackknife within the tunnel. And so therefore, he can start to take immediate remedial action. So that's another way within an operational sense that we can leverage that digital twin to apply operational-based processes and decisions within that sector. So the question is, okay, if we were capturing all this digital data back in the 80s, why has it taken us so long to get to this level of sophistication and analysis? And that's a pretty good question. But it's probably fair to say back in the 80s and the 90s, as an industry, we weren't really thinking that broadly back then, especially in my world of civil design and civil construction. We simply took the opportunity to replicate within the CAD environment whatever we were doing the previous 20, 30 years. In other words, we used CAD to develop the same output as we had for years. And that was a series of 2D hard copy deliverables consisting of things like cross sections, long sections, and plan sets. Now, I will admit, we were doing this work, the design work a lot quicker and the drafting work a lot quicker. So we could test out various design scenarios or alternatives a lot quicker. However, all we really did was take the drafting board workflow and put that into a CAD workflow. And it wasn't really until the mid to late 90s. And in this case here, I recall working with Trimble. So they're a big instrument manufacturer. I mean, they're a huge conglomerate now, but back in the 90s, they were focused on GPS. That was just coming to the fore back then. So we worked with Trimble and a common client of ours in New Zealand who were wanting to push their design they had created in CAD into machine control. Now, this was the first time this had been attempted anywhere in the world. And you're thinking, well, geez, why New Zealand? Trimble had a big research office there in Christchurch, and the subdivision that was being developed by our common user was being done in Christchurch. So what the machine control needed was a 3D BIM model to succeed. Now, I'll admit the digital data required was pretty basic. It was a 3D design surface and some 3D strings. However, and to the best of my knowledge, this was the first time we had actually begun to use digital data in a way that had huge benefits and large productivity improvements for those personas or disciplines downstream from the design workflow, i.e. in construction. Now, the question is why? So why are we doing this? So even though this graph is a few years old, it does highlight the productivity growth for our industry. And our productivity growth for our industry actually regressed throughout a 10-year period. And within this graph, you can also see the correlation between productivity growth along the x-axis and the digitization associated with each of the industry's research. So the digitization index along the y-axis, including the similar industries in utilities and oil and gas. So as an industry, it became blatantly obvious to us that we need to embrace a digital approach to improve and increase our productivity. And when we look, especially from a civil infrastructure point of view, typically we're developing road networks, rail networks, bridge structures, etc. And these are public facing and public used infrastructure. So paramount to any decision we make, developing and designing, constructing these assets is safety, and safety is always number one. So we always think about safety when we're developing and designing these assets. But one of the more pressing issues that we're seeing, well, I'm definitely seeing, is environmental and sustainability considerations. Granted, within our industry, we've always thought about these, but as we head towards the next couple of decades, we're thinking about sustainability considerations more and more than we ever have before. In actual fact, the Infrastructure Sustainability Council here in Australia are really leading the way here in ANZ, in our region, with bringing this much to the fore and highlighting the importance that as designers and as throughout the project delivery, through construction, operations, etc., we think about environmental and sustainability considerations. These last two, data analytics and digitization, they really go, and pardon the pun, hand in hand. And our future must embrace digital technologies. So that's the why. Who's driving this? So most state-based transportation authorities are now fully aligned as to why the need for a paradigm shift in the way we approach the planning, the design, construction, maintenance, and operation of these, all important public-facing infrastructure assets. As it is blatantly obvious to all, there is a need for our industry to greatly improve our efficiencies and productivity. And there is acknowledgement, especially within government, that this digital data evolution is the best vehicle in which to obtain these goals. Now, you may have to ask your parents about the man in this picture. He was famous for making this statement at election time for a presidential run within the USA. He was also famous or infamous for other things he did when he was president, but again, you'll need to ask your parents about that one. But we can take that statement and rework it for today's purpose. Today, it really is about the data. It's about data, well, as I said, they're data, and more data, and that's what it's really all about. Now, I'm going to digress slightly. I'm just going to go off from a civil infrastructure point of view and go into the mining world here. So Rio Tinto has a operational centre there at Perth, near Perth Airport, domestic airport there, and it's regarded as a large-scale application of digital twinning. And as you can see there, feeding into this operational centre is 2.4 terabytes of data per minute. And this is from millions of sensors that are set up in the 16 iron ore mines up in the Pilbara region of Western Australia, and 1,600 kilometres of rail. So that's a hell of a lot of information that's now feeding in. So that's a lot of data that needs to be dissected, needs to be reviewed, needs to be used to make better and more informed decisions about the operation. Now, mining is a funny beast because mining is an operation, but it's also a construction site, so or a deconstruction site. So, there is ongoing design and construction that's happening in the midst of an operation, a large-scale operation such as a mine. With bringing it back into our world, our civil infrastructure world, there are signs within operational centres, rail centres, road centres, of that volume of information or that scale of information that's coming into them. From a project delivery point of view, I'm going to scale this back a little bit on the lower side here and just talk about the work that Transport for New South Wales are doing in this digital engineering space. Needless to say that most government departments, most government road and rail transportation departments are setting up, various digital frameworks and standards or specifications, probably leading the charge is Transport for New South Wales in this space. And back in last year, in April last year, they released their latest version of their DE standards. So this has progressed significantly actually on the previous versions. And it highlights the amount of data that they want collected on every asset that gets designed, you know, whether that's pavement, whether that's curb, whether that's a light pole, whether that's a guardrail. They want a whole stack of this metadata, extended attributed data that's associated to those particular assets at design time, which will then live on and live through the construction phase and then into operations and maintenance. So that's the why and the what and the who. So when's this happening? Well, it's happening now. There's a real push within our industry to collect as much digital data as possible. So just to summarize, why are we doing this as an industry is really to improve and increase our productivity. Who's doing it? Who's driving this change? It is the owners. It's the road and rail authorities within ANZ here. What are they asking for and what's required? It's data, and more data. And when are they doing it? Well, they're asking for it today. So there is a real paradigm shift within our industry, moving from those traditional 2D deliverables into digital deliverables. I like to say we're in the twilight zone. We're in the middle of that transition. You know, we're still delivering on those old deliverables. There's still a requirement to deliver, you know, reams of PDFs and plan sets and things like that. But there is also a requirement to deliver all this digital data. Now, as a industry, and as, you know, the owners of these assets, they're really leaving it up to industry to determine how best to deliver on these new requirements, these new digital data, this new paradigm shift that we're taking. And that's where Bentley come into it. This is where, you know, Ron is going to talk about, you know, the digital twin, the infrastructure digital twin, and our solution for this space, which is the iTwin platform. So that's what I've provided there is just a little bit of a background to how we got to where we are today, why we're here, and what is the expectation moving forward. And Ron's going to now jump through and explain a little bit more on the digital twin and our iTwin platform, and over the course of the next day and a half, get into the weeds of it as well. So with that, I might throw to you, Ron.
Yeah, before that, I'll just jump in and do a formal introduction to Ron. So, sorry, Ron. I mean, let me do that again. Ron, as Dave said, it's been about 24 years of experience with various Bentley products. So that's almost half a century of experience. He's a senior developer, success specialist, and has 24 years of working on various Bentley products. His experience spans from being an end user of Bentley tool, that means he has been a consumer, through to support and consultancy across a wide variety of products. Working with both engineering firms and owner operators, that means he gets the perception of what a consultancy firm does and an owner operator within the oil and gas sector for many years, allows Ron to apply a broad end-to-end approach to his work. Relating to the customer need and the compulsion of solving the customer's problem, gives Ron the ability to assess and provide solution in a timely manner in the right way. Ron's current focus, which is what is going to be very relevant to us, is enabling clients to explore their dark data, which Dave touched upon, by unlocking the information using the Bentley Infrastructure Digital Twin suite of product. This includes integration of CAD source data and data streams such as Azure Digital Twin, IoT data, and camera feeds. Ron, over to you, Matt.
Okay, thanks, Sri. Thanks, Dave, for that steering PowerPoint as well. It's cool. All right, so First session for me today is just a bit of a discussion on digital twins, a background, why we're doing all this stuff that we're doing, what's the pure essence of a digital twin. As you can see, I've got one of those lovely long titles that people tend to get in the industry. But my primary job at the moment is to helping people who are doing development work with the iTwin platform, so the Bentley iTwin platform, realize all their success and dreams and go to market or whatever avenue you're taking with those. But more of that a bit later on. All right, so Dave talked about data, and more data, but unfortunately, data doesn't do it for me. So you can give me lots and lots of data, but without putting a context to that data, I can't do anything meaningful with it. You can tell me 35 kilometers an hour as a fact. I have absolutely no context what that is. Is that the speed you're traveling in a train? Are you driving a car? Are you going over the speed limit if you are driving a car? Are you hurtling through the air in some sort of gyrocopter or something? I don't really know. Right. So even though you can get 2.4 terabytes of data, which is truly impressive, Dave, for Rio Tinto, that is sort of useless without context around that data. So really what we're trying to do here is take that accumulation of stuff that comes in from sensors, people, processes, wherever all that raw data information comes from, and we're trying to put some context around that to turn that into information. So information is something that we can start to use. It can be structured, we can report on it, we can do stuff with it, we can categorize it, we can condense it, we can get meaning out of that information once it's all been structured away. So from that, we can then gain knowledge. So what we're trying to do is take that data, make it more informative. From that, we can begin to then learn patterns, perhaps. We can get concepts of why something is behaving the way it is. It, prompts ideas. We want to discuss that with peers, perhaps, and take that on another journey. And over time, what happens is we gain insight into why that happened. So with that knowledge of a pump malfunctioning because of X, Y, and Z, we gain that knowledge as to why that occurred, and eventually they become wisdoms and we gain insight into that. So when you see a similar pattern emerge again, you can go, hey, I know what that's going to be. That's because of X, Y, Z happened in the past. Let's check that first off. Now, you'll see these float around. You probably use these in presentations yourself, but they all basically represent the same thing of taking that data that Dave loves, putting it into some sort of context to say, hey, this is what this looks like, whether that be schematical or 3D, and we'll talk about that a bit further in a sec, so that people can then gain knowledge, or we can pass that off to a computer to do something similar, which then leads to wisdom and reflection and higher performance. Now, the origin of a digital twin was first proposed by Dr. Michael Greaves in 2002. And the objective was originally to mitigate the undesirable emergent behavior in a complex system. So that is whether it's predictable or unpredictable. It's defined as a set of virtual information constructs. And that fully described a potential or actual physical product from microatomic level to macro geometric level. Now, of course, I did not make any of that stuff up. That's taken straight out of the paper there. But since then, the digital twin has been mostly employed by the manufacturing industry. They're a bit smaller scale. They have a real easy way to jump on board with that sort of stuff for their product lifecycle management. And of course, we had the joy of NASA leading the way, and I'm sure everyone's heard those stories about, hey, we had to take a cube and stick it into a round hole. But the key there is actually the connection between the physical space and the virtual space, and we term that the digital thread. So that enables the data to be transmitted from the physical to the virtual, and then the information that we gather from that, so pass our data, adding context, etc., back to our original diagram there, being able to pass that back into the physical space to affect change on that physical space. Come on, slide. All right, I seem to have a slide stuck issue. Let me see if I can get this going. There we go. All right. So the essence, if we break digital twins up, there's a bit of misconception here, and we might just fast forward through these three. So what Dave talked about in his was about digital models. We've been making them since the 90s, mid-90s. We've been making digital models of things, and either that's for design or throughout the construction, and of course from the as-built phase as well. So most people have been hanging on to them, and certainly in oil and gas, they've sort of run that field ahead of everyone else, if you like, because there's a lot of benefit into having that maintained as a digital model. They're always after process changes, they're always after efficiencies, and having that just accelerates that efficiency gain. So then we move into a different scenario where we can have a digital shadow, where the physical object is feeding data back into our digital object. And keep in mind that the digital object is not necessarily a 3D model, right? So it could be a process or a schematic diagram, as you saw in the Rio Tinto screenshot that Dave had across the top of the control. And then, of course, where we move into the digital twin phase is all about being able to affect the physical object from the digital twin. Now, that's still a ways off in some industries. Some industries have been doing that stuff for years, but of course, it's not as sexy as what we're going to try and do for the remainder of the course here. But again, some industries have been doing that for quite some time. Right, so to summarize that and to make that a bit more simplistic, what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a bunch of ones and zeros that replicate what we see in the real world. And there's a bunch of different ways we can do that with CAD, we can do that with reality models, we can do that with process schematics as well. Now that's going to take a bunch of information that we can also use within that digital model or the digital twin if we get that far. So we're going to need to be able to pull on stuff like IoT feeds, for example, perhaps cameras. We're going to use and expose things that contextualize that data around, tagging if it's a oil and gas plant or a plant of some style, maintenance records, work orders, etc. And then we've got the other side where we can take that and turn that into a completely different context where we have people who are doing inspections in a device like a HoloLens or a mixed reality device, mobile phone in Google Cardboard, for example. They're sitting there doing inspections because we've got high fidelity reality models being streamed back to them and that. Now, of course, one of the missing components there that we've sort of keyed on is the 4D, so the timeline of change. So some of that wisdom is all about, okay, processing that data and knowing what happened in the past, but we might want to rewind back to that point and be able to have a look at something when it was at that stage and say, well, hey, we were pushing efficiency back then. Here's the plan as it was today. Let's sort of mix and match and roll between the two timelines. Now, of course, it doesn't really matter what industry you're in, whether that's civil, whether that's oil and gas, whether that's mining, whether it's building management, maintenance, all that sort of stuff. The same premise applies in all different industries. So even if it's from something like digging up services and working on underground services, that premise still applies to that style of industry as well. Now, of course, as Dave said, we didn't have that sort of technology back then. So, why weren't we doing this back in the 90s? Well, yep, 3D modeling was taking off. We didn't have the technology that could actually do all this stuff. And now that we do, hey, we're still riding that wave. So even though Dave showed that wave crashing on the beach, that wave's going to go on forever. And if you can run at the front of that, that's perfect. So the perfect time to start your digital twin was yesterday. And of course, that integrates itself throughout the entire workflow process. So whether you're planning something, whether you're actually designing something, whether you're analyzing something for simulation data, or you're doing constructions and you want to say, hey, what is what's being constructed what we actually designed? And of course, that flows through into operations as well. But the idea behind the digital twin ideally is for resilient infrastructure. So it's about having that infrastructure recover when there is some sort of event. Being able to insert something that takes that 2.4 terabytes of data and enact with it, because that's just way too much for humans to process at a given second. Having something that can interact with that big data, that data that's streaming in from all the sensors all over the place for that asset, and derive intelligence from that, greatly creates advantages for being able to maintain that physical asset in peak performance. And of course, efficiency gains and all those other things as well. So the resilience of an infrastructure system is defined as the capacity to recover to the design performance after some sort of event, some sort of hazard, perhaps a flood or an earthquake or whatever that happens to be. Right? The faster the infrastructure recovers, the more resilient it is, and that can be, done by maintenance. It can be done by the design of there as well. But we need to figure out what that current performance is. Now, of course, infrastructure deteriorates over time, and without good preparation or good maintenance for a possible event, then it will take a long time to recover, or it may actually never recover. I mean, we've seen lots of bridges in the current flooding here being completely destroyed, wiped out, and having to be totally rebuilt, unrecoverable. So ideally, what we would like our infrastructure is for it to be, well maintained and designed for its performance capacity. That way, if there are any hazard events, we can quickly recover and get that system back on track. So in an aging system, obviously that falls under maintenance. All right. So infrastructure works with various data, physical, mechanical, whatever it happens to be. They're all collected and updated over time. And as we've seen, that can be an actual lot of data that comes in there. So that data allows us to build a digital twin presented, in my view, as a set of digital objects for information from its original definition. So that could be derived from, the BIM model, reality data, whatever method you use to capture that information for that existing physical asset. It could be a hydraulics model, there could be physics-based models involved in that. But it's all about taking all of that information and being able to put that together into a digital twin to be able to support decisions against that infrastructure itself. And of course, to improve that resilience in there. So as an example of something that we've done previously, I didn't want to jump into what we're doing today, but I thought we'd jump back a year or so and have a look at something, pre really cool tools. So we had a look at the smart water grid. We did an initiative of the smart water grid for Singapore. So we work with can't remember what they're called now off the top of my head. We work with the organisation there. It'll come to me in a sec. And we tracked a bunch of information over 300 something sensors that they have in Singapore across that whole island. And those sensors capture things like pressure, flow, and things like water quality data. So the ultimate goal was to build a real-time or a near real-time monitoring system to enable what they call a smart water grid. However, they also had a few challenges, and one of those was that all they were interested in was the data analysis and the analytics. So there's an education point as well that comes across in, hey, we can take that data and do stuff with it, but we still need to put that context in around there. So the ultimate goal became building a real-time or a near real-time monitoring system and they turned that the smart water grid. Right, so it took some time. So not everything, unfortunately, happens in the spate of an afternoon. So it took about 2 years, and we had to look at an integrated approach to enable the digital twin for the smart water grid. Some of that comes back to not all of the information that they had at hand was in a format that was suitable. So there was some, digitization of the underground reticulation network, for example, that had to happen. Some of the information that was coming in for the sensors was malformed or irrelevant, I guess you'd say, for the process. So there was some learning on both parts. Definitely on the side of keeping records up to date is a good one, and of course making sure that the data that you're getting in from the information in the field is processable and useful. So basically for that, we broke that down and we used a data-driven model and some AI, and we identified for each time series events for the multiple sensors across the network. And we created a thing called a system anomaly event within the system. So when those events are identified, we feed that into our hydraulic model that we redigitized from some of the old work that they had there. And that way that allowed the operators to put some context around where that information was, around where it was in the physical network as well, and work on that in there. Now, over that process, we had to look at a smaller subset of the area over the time, so we didn't do the entire thing. And what we identified was that from the top of the chart here, you can see that there's an interesting event detected within the flow. So it shows a big spike, and after that, the water flow actually dropped off to zero. So that means that there's a huge water main break somewhere, and the whole system was almost shut down. So we deemed that a rather disruptive event, of course. But in the meantime, analyzing that data, so some of this was quite historic. We also detected that there was an event 3 days earlier, and we were wondering if we could actually localize those events to see if there was any such coincidence. So using localization, so again, putting that data into a context that we can actually visualize easily. With the red points of the model were the localized hotspots for the events that we established. So they managed to go out and validate the disruptive event of the big water main break. And it's right actually in the spot where we identified, which was pretty good proof of concept. And what that means is we actually detected and localized the hotspot 3 days ahead. So obviously, unfortunately, we didn't catch this one, but 3 days ahead of the disruptive water main break. So based on the data, we gained a bit of knowledge there that if that sort of event would occur, then later on, we're likely to see a major disruptive event. Which was the 700 millimeter main actually split in there. So to put a quick wrap around the smart water grid tech, it's not a one single thing. It was a group of information that came in from, or data that came in from things like water meters going through the collector through FTP servers. So we're talking 2019 here. Going back into the management system, which did the detection and localization, and then was exposed out in the operations center. Now, of course, the reticulation network doesn't necessarily need to be a fancy 3D model. It can be, of course, but a schematic or a diagrammatic overview is fine for those as well. All right, so while we were there, we also did some other stuff around discolored water as well. And some of the lessons learned around the sensor information that comes in from those two. But in reaching out and in discussion with a lot of other companies or organizations that work with us, we found that there was some of the DOTs in the US were actually doing things like vibration sensoring on bridges, which was quite interesting. And the way that they would get their knowledge as opposed to just recording data from the bridge was they started dissecting the bridge. So they would run a loader over the bridge, take the vibration transmitters and the stress sensors, and then they would actually start chopping girders off that bridge and then analysing the impact that that had. Now, the bridge was due to be decommissioned, which was fine, but from that they could then gain their knowledge and their wisdoms for if that type of event happens somewhere else, we can do that. Now, of course, digital twins goes a little bit further than just taking that raw data in that might be ones and zeros from sensors and things like that, where it's also used for saving or helping protect human life, if you like. So I'm not sure about you, but I don't particularly want to be hanging over a bridge in a little metal box like they are in that photo on the left there. That's definitely not my thing. For a bridge inspection. So using things like reality models or high resolution photographs, we can take that information and pass that off to machine learning, and we can get the machine to actually come back and tell us where that segments or the corrosion is appearing within the bridge. So it's not just a simplistic, sort of bounding box. We can actually go through and identify the edges of that corrosion in there, and we can go through and categorize that corrosion as well. So, if we've got heavy corrosion in a certain area, then that certainly warrants further investigation or maintenance repair as well. Now, taking that a bit further, so again, keeping people out of harm's way, you'll see the water tower mentioned a bit later on, but they're quite high. So the ability to actually fly a drone around that water tower, taking high-res images and then passing that information off to our deep learning tools allows us to then go and identify cracks in those water towers. Now, again, that all forms part of our digital twin. So that model that is created from that scan is, of course, used as part of our digital twin as well. So we end up with a unified approach that comes from data collection, so the image acquisition through the training, and then runs through the defect and segmentation. And we'll see a little bit about this on Tuesday morning as well. Right, so that's the end result that the operator sees. So even though we saw a mesh previously, the end operator actually gets to see the cracks detected within those water towers, and again, certainly not something that you typically want a human rappelling down the side of or scaffolding up to see those. Now, I'm not used to sort of standing up and lecturing everyone, so if anyone's got any Q&As, I know the chat's turned off, but feel free to stick your hand up and we can have a bit of a discussion there. I think, is that fine, Shri? Sorry, it's my first time, so please be
Yep. Adil, can you enable the chat if they want to chat it out? Adil?
You might be getting a tea or a coffee, I'd say.
Yeah. Sure, mate. Ron.
It's okay.
Adil or Suam, if you can. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, sir.
So anyone who has got a question and then share to pick up the microphone and talk, it's perfectly all right to type your question on the chat, please.
That includes for Dave as well, of course.
Yeah, there's the first one.
Please ask away.
I just wanted to make a comment, Cheryl here. I'm just off video at the moment, but just wanted to make a comment. It's really interesting to see some more specific examples there of how the dynamic story is told, moving on from the initial introduction around point in time BIM versus ongoing digital twin usefulness. So yeah, thanks very much for that. It's super helpful when people ask me those questions to be able to point out the difference a bit more clearly.
A lot of that's old people hang up as well, right? So Dave and I started in an industry where that was quite common to 3D models were sort of wowsy, but to my kids now, they're sort of like, well, why aren't you doing that through AR, Dad? What's going on? It's crazy.
Too funny, indeed, indeed.
All right, so you can pop some questions in the chat, or definitely unmute yourself and feel free to ask. I'll give a minute or so for that one.
Yep. Thanks, Nitesh. Nitesh says it was a wonderful session to begin with. Now that BIM is the base for digital twin, how can BIM professional transition to digital twin technology? Should we be involved in learning IoT and programming, etc.? Good question. Ron?
Well, I was thinking Dave might be best positioned to answer this one. He's in there deep and dirty, but no, in general, what most industries do is they have a digital division, if that makes sense, and they're full of the Unreal or the JavaScript, TypeScript type programmers, and then they come up with their ideas of what they want to do and how they want to advance into the digital twin field. And what you'll find is for most industries, it's quite different, right? So they will then recycle that BIM model into the digital twin if it's current. If it's not current, of course, that needs to be updated before that comes into there. So for a BIM professional, what we find is a lot of them keep doing what they do because they know it so well, and BIM is still a sought after delivery method. However, a lot of them spin off a separate digital division that then take that the next stage further into digital twin and linking to sensors and so on and so forth. That's been my experience. Dave's may be different.
No, you're spot on there, Ron. So yeah, look, the BIM model is a stepping stone toward a digital twin. So as Ron mentioned there, within our domain, the civil domain, we're seeing that BIM models are being created more and more, and it's a useful starting point for construction. It's a useful starting point for the owners and the operations and maintenance people, and it morphs into a digital twin from that point onwards. But looking at the question, how can BIM professionals transition? I think you need to position yourself to want to be able to understand how that data is used downstream. From a design perspective, I know from my experience and the experience of our users within the design space, they're called upon to create more accurate 3D models and representations of the proposed asset or the proposed project. So they spend a lot more time developing these models up. They're now being asked to add more data to these models. And a lot of the benefits from, within these design houses, a lot of the benefits for doing all that work is found downstream. It is found in construction. It is found in operations and maintenance. A lot of the work is done at the design phase by, creating that more accurate 3D model, adding a lot more metadata to the particular assets. They don't always see the benefits though. Within the design, yes, there's clash detection. There's other components within a digital twin framework that is beneficial, but a lot of the benefits are downstream. So understanding what those benefits are downstream, I think from a BIM professional point of view, will open up so many more doors. So understanding how those models and the data associated with the models are going to be used downstream, I think, personally, I think that will open up opportunities for those who want to pursue that.
Hope that answered your question, Nitesh, and that was an interesting question. Thanks for asking.
That was a good one. Right. So the next session's about Bentley and our contribution to digital twins, and I don't really like the way it's sort of framed, but hopefully it'll make sense what I was trying to achieve with the topic. It's not all about Bentley, of course, but yeah. All right. Let me just give up and move on.
Absolutely, Ron. I think I'm very tempted to jump in there. To all the audience here, one of the prime vision of launching a digital twin is nothing about Bentley. It's about the industry vision. Because when both Dave and Ron very, very eloquently put it across the maturity of digital twin in the manufacturing industry, and then possibly the lack of it in the construction industry or infrastructure industry, one of the biggest challenge was the interoperability, because you have more than 7 different designing tools, each with its own language, and then possibly half a dozen construction management tools. So when you want a digital twin, when you talk about one common data environment, so interoperability became a challenge. So it is the vision. I wouldn't say it was. It is the vision of Bentley to address that challenge of interoperability, and that's how iTwin platform came. And they made it open source with an API. You will see it today and tomorrow. So it's about Bentley's commitment to the industry rather than Bentley's marketing. Kind of over. It's a vision. Hand it over to you, Ron.
That's it. I wish Keith Bentley was here to actually explain it. He does it so well. I honestly can't top his. But so when we set out to get into digital twins, obviously being a software company, we had a lot of tech already. We're pretty good at doing a bunch of stuff. But what we've found is that industry is wanting to take a lot of that back. So it's not a hey, software company developed this new widget. Wow, it's great. Let's shape our industry around that widget. What's actually happening now more so than ever is that industry is saying, well, that's a great widget, but that's useless. And we got no purpose for that. So let's get together as industry and let's define some cool stuff. So when we looked around for digital twins and how we could build some software that would, take industry to next level, industry 4.0, as Dave showed, the only ones that were actually putting anything out there was the Centre for Digital Built Britain, believe it or not. So they created a thing called the Gemini principles. Now, the Gemini principles are all about the foundation or the federation of their national digital twin. So the Britons are right behind this. It's an open industry group. You can Google it. You can jump on board. You can subscribe up. They've got tons of content in there. It's quite fantastic actually. And in all honesty, they're sort of ahead of their game, I think, and they're good at evolving as well. So it's not just that they've set down a framework and hey, they're going to sit back and watch how it pans out. They're sort of adjusting that framework as time goes on. So I'm going to read you out their spiel so you don't have to look it up yourself. But the idea of a national digital twin means that federations of individual digital twins will be joined together by securely shared data. By connecting digital twins across sectors, the infrastructure in our cities will benefit immensely. So this doesn't mean that every single digital twin will be federated, though. This will only apply when it provides value. Right, so part of their set out was a couple of different things, and I've broken them up so we can sort of chat about them. And again, let's keep this informal. If you want to ask some questions or just raise your hand up, Shri, you'll hopefully pick that up and be able to work with you to get that question answered. So by setting out those values at the beginning of the process, so they got in a good couple of years ago, it's going to make things a lot easier for industry to be able to share that information. So rather than coming up with this and then someone coming up with that and going, oh, I can't swear. Oh, goodness me, that is not professional. That is not a way we can take that information and share it amongst ourselves. It's siloed. It's useless information, basically, for everyone else. They came up with some purposes, so it must be for the public good. It must provide a general benefit, basically, to the general public. So basically, don't come up with something and then say, "Hey, here's mine. Let's go down this path." It must enable improvement in performance as well, while creating value. So don't just generate a digital twin for the fun of generating a digital twin, was the general context around that. And it must provide real insight into the built environment. So even though we say, hey, your digital twin should be at the start of your life cycle, and the reason that we say that is there's benefit, during the planning phase. You can analyze things, you can do flood modeling, you can do a whole heap of stuff early on. The Digital Built Britain is all about, hey, at the end of the process, when this thing is constructed, we've got to maintain it and we've got to do stuff with it. There we go. Yeah. So some of the other things they set out was trust. So trust is one of the major parts behind that as well. So it must enable security. Obviously, there's certain bits of infrastructure that people shouldn't know about, I guess, or shouldn't have access to some of the information perhaps that's centered around that infrastructure as well. So it must enable security and be secure within itself. It must also be as open as possible and transparent as possible, and built using legitimately good quality data. Now some of these obviously Bentley can help with, but some of those, quality data, probably not so much. Finally, it must function effectively, right? So there's no point having all that stuff if it doesn't actually work very well. So a federation of digital twins must be based on a standard connected environment. There must be clear ownership of the twin, as well as clear governance and regulation. There is also a requirement for digital twins to adapt as the available technology continuously evolves. So they realised that we're still riding that wave. There's still a whole heap of stuff to be done around digital twins and where that market is headed. So taking all of that information from the Gemini principles on board, so that, remember, again, this was sort of just pre-COVID that we've got into that. We realized that the information we need to store and the size of that information, so potentially thinking about, what Digital Build Britain's trying to do is take all of the UK and turn that into a digital twin. Now I know they're a bit smaller and you can fit them into Victoria, but that's still a chunk of data that's sitting there, right? That's a lot of data. It's not a building or a small water reticulation network for a town, right? It's a lot of data. So we knew that it was going to be big, and we knew that needed a database approach, right? So they scale out pretty well. It had to be something that could take that sort of information. But at the same time, we knew that also needed to be portable. We got people running around with phones and tablets and disconnected devices, perhaps as you transit, London Underground or whatever the case happens to be, or you're out in the Pilbara, in the middle of nowhere. You need to be able to disconnect and take that twin with you. So what we did is we actually settled on a SQLite database. It can be served up from the cloud. It's both a database and a file, so you can download it. It's all self-contained. There's heaps of little widgets and tools that go along with it. It can be made to be scaled as required, and it can be used by anyone on any platform. So for our iModel, which is our terminology of a model where you've put all your 3D information into, if you like, that iModel can be sitting on a desktop, a tablet, phone, cloud. It could be on all sources all at once. So we realized that needed to support the BIM content or the CAD data content that's coming in, right? So pretty much everything is done with CAD right now. If people are backdrafting stuff, they go and do it in CAD. It's quick, it's convenient. You can pump some data in there, and it's fantastic. So for that, we made a bunch of connectors for various different formats that are common in the industry. So if you're using a non-Bentley product, and shame on you, I mean, really. But if you are using a non-Bentley product, we cater for things like Autodesk products. Civil 3D is out there as well. If you're piecing together bits from, you're getting translations of data from IFC, or if you're in, oil and gas and you're using, Viva or Intergraph-based products, we can take all that data from whatever part of the industry you're in and pull that information into an iModel with quite high fidelity. I can let you know that. So we also realized that visual data wasn't necessarily going to come from CAD. So perhaps you were going out with your iPhone. The new ones have got the nice little laser scanning thingies, and taking or making a reality mesh of the localized area, or perhaps you're doing it with, tripod-based scanners, whatever the case happens to be. But that's also relevant data. So point cloud data, reality mesh data, no matter what that source is coming from. Now, there are other industry segments that do a great job of taking large data sets and turning them into streaming tiles. So similar to the way that things like Google Maps works. You open it up, you zoom in a bit with the satellite view turned on, and it starts putting tiles in on your screen. And as they pop in, or as you roll closer, they get better and better quality. Cesium have been doing that for a while as well, and we originally, well, we still are part of the cesium working group there as well. So, if you've got a cesium ion source because that's the route that you went in the past, or you want to go that route because of whatever reason, we can suck that data in as well. We also realize that sometimes you just need a blank canvas. So not all digital data actually starts with a 3D model. Perhaps it's something that's constructed on the fly from maybe information that comes in. So you've got a bus that's roving around the neighborhood, picking up certain people at different stops. That bus is not a static piece of equipment. It's actually moving around. So you may, in that case, need a blank canvas where we just move the bus around. Or it may be part of the scene is actually animated in the case of things like wind turbines and so on. So we also made it that you can have no source. So you start with nothing and off you go. Now, we made all of these tooling available at no cost to you. So you can grab the tool called the iTwin Synchronizer and the iTwin Snapshot tool, and they will allow you to download the connectors for your CAD data and convert that into an iModel. Now, that doesn't mean that that's a once-off operation either. So as new data comes in, or the model evolves, or perhaps you're working with other people. So Dave might be doing the civil design work, and I'm doing the concrete layout for pads, or whatever the case happens to be. We can then federate those two different data sources from CAD into a single iModel. So we can take that data and join it all together so that we get a complete overview model from the disparate CAD sources as well. So yeah, we realized that that was going to come in. We needed a way to get that into a standard source of information repository, which is our iModel. It's a SQLite database as a summary, so you can use it as a file or online, and to convert into those iModels is free. Now, some of you might not have been exposed to reality data, and it's been mentioned an absolute bunch in the past, so this is my only video, I promise. But basically, the data capture is done either from something like a fixed wing, a drone, or from a mobile phone, or from a high quality camera as well. But more common in industry is people out on site with their mobile phone capturing data. So what they do is they go through, take that information as a series of photographs, and you can mix and match this with laser scans as well. Slight sales pitch here, but we process that information in a product called Context Capture, and of course there are other products out there in the system. And from that you get a meshed reality model that allows you to review that thing in 3D. Now, if we wind back a little bit, the reason that people do this is they don't have a CAD model. They're checking up on construction data, okay, let's see what the site looks like today, because we can drone fly things and reduce that information quite quickly. Or they're starting out a new project. So a new project, we don't know what's out there. Let's just go scan it and we can build against that reality data. I'll let the rest of this one run through. So in the end, you end up with a nice 3D model, which typically doesn't have much data associated with it, right? It's very pretty, but besides the visualization aspect or the ability to pull locational data, height, etc. from that, it doesn't have any other data associated with it. So it doesn't say, hey, that's a street sign, or that's a you know, a manhole cover, etc., etc. Of course, we can take that data and enhance it, but the general premise of your initial reality mesh will look something like that. And that's how we get there. I'm not sure why that did. All right, so how do we get information into the iModel? So that visualization data can come from anywhere. So the iModels are typically about 3D data, but we'll have a look at 2D stuff a bit later on. And typically that's historically from a CAD project done in the 90s, I might add, or it could be something that was done yesterday as well. But we can, of course, do that from capturing reality data as well. We use those synchronization tools to pull that data together. And the iModel allows you to combine that all into a single piece itself. So that's your data acquisition. So the contribution there is, of course, that we made a bunch of open source tools that you can use. You can write your own if you really want to. If you've made an exciting tool that captures data in some way, shape, or form, you can certainly write your own. And we'll come and have a look at GitHub in a sec. So with that data that's coming in from anywhere and usually has an unknown structure behind it, thank you, BIM managers, we set out to make a way that could also be simplified for the user as well. So with that, we've got something that we love called BIS, and that stands for a base infrastructure schema. Now, again, this is all out there. It's in GitHub if you want to have a look at the base infrastructure schema. We have a working group that you can join if you want input into the way we organize our base infrastructure schema. But basically, BIS allows us to pool similar data into a structure, simply. So let's say we're pooling all the data sources for an existing facility. And some of that might come from CAD app A and some of it might come from CAD app B. When we pool that data using the connectors, they do their best effort to align that data into the schema. So when you query something that might be, to us, a beam, and it's been done in CAD app A, and then we've got a different source for other beams, maybe in a different part of the facility as CAD app B, we make sure that they come across as beams. So when you say, hey, give me all the beams in this iModel, you get all the beams out. So we've done a bit of work there around taking disparate sources of data and trying to restructure them into a single style. Now, all the data that comes with them from the BIM model still comes through and is still prevalent, but the base infrastructure types, we've tried to stack all them together so you don't have to worry about it. All right, so we've got all this data, it's visual, it may have some information attached to it, it might not do. We need some way to see this. So we also need to be able to use this visualization tool or analysis tool on any device anywhere, right? So the obvious choice for us was to make it a web application. And I can tell you for Bentley, that was a bit different. We're not against web apps. We have lots of them, but we've never actually gone into a web visualization app before. It was one of our first times. And again, we're talking a couple of years ago. So with that, we created a WebGL viewer that allows you to visualize and manipulate the iModel itself. So it's based on HTML5, it's React based. And for those who don't know about React, it's a Facebook thing. They invented it. It's out there. It's quite efficient and quite good. It's done in TypeScript, and we do that because at the core we're a software company and we like to write cool software. And TypeScript puts all that rigor around developing software and making sure things are defined and works well. But of course, that all boils down basically to JavaScript when you go and churn that out. So if you're a TypeScript or C# developer, you'll pick up TypeScript nice and easy. if you prefer to do things in JavaScript, you can do that as well. And we open source that, right? So as part of those, Gemini principles, there must be some openness about it. So all the stuff we're talking about at the moment, where we've got the word free at the end of the PowerPoint, is basically saying, well, that's all open source, or it's free for you to access it. It's persistent. It's not going to go away. If you take a snapshot of it now, you can work with it for the next 30 years, should you choose to do so. So we realized that, creating the iModel, there's no point having it if you couldn't use it and easily build upon it. So again, it's all open source. We welcome any contributions if you're into that kind of thing. And you can visit us on GitHub in the iTwin region there. We've got a bunch of repositories, and we'll talk about them after lunch. Right. So one of the questions that we get pretty often is, how do you guys stay in business on the free stuff? Right. So we created iTwins because we understand that infrastructure isn't something that just disappears overnight. So you really want something that you can use 5, 10, 15 years time. So being open source, it's yours. Have at it. You can take it. You can make it do whatever you need it to do. It's yours to use. So we knew that it needed to be portable and scalable and flexible. And we've been doing software for a while now, so we also know that never stops evolving. But the real reason that we're giving it away is we believe that we can actually create a business for ourselves on top of that ecosystem that's available to you as well, and that we can evolve on that as well. So Bentley are sort of leaders in some parts of the industry, and we're excited to be able to take something that you can do and then show you what we think the future is as well, which sometimes we get wrong, but that's not being recorded, right? As a side note, we have many paid products as well that sit on top of that stack. And we have a raft of paid for platform services as well, which we'll take a look at tomorrow. And that interface with the iModel ecosystem in there too. So how do we stay in business on the free stuff? Well, we see this is going to be a longer endeavor, but basically as a core platform, we've got other development teams in Bentley that drive purchasable product sitting on top of that stack as well. So if we make the core good, that we can make great software, then everyone's involved in there. All right, and luckily that's the end of the slideshow. But if you've got any questions and answers, any questions on that would be fantastic. I'll just kill that share off.
You got any question? Feel free to jump in and ask, or other if you can enable the text. I mean the.
Yes, it's already enabled. Yeah.
Thank you. Feel free to use your keyboard, please. Thank you.
While we hang out for the lunch bell to ring, let me just throw this up here. So after lunch, we'll be doing a little bit of coding, not a great deal. However, if you want to code along with me, you're more than welcome to. We'll be doing the quick start tutorial. Now, if you want to code along, you'll need a couple of tools on your machine. So I use Visual Studio Code. We will need Node.js. You'll need Git as well, and pretty much everyone uses Chrome, I think. But if you're using Edge, that's the new version of Edge. That's also fine too. If you don't want to code along, that's completely fine as well. And we'll be covering some of that no-code stuff towards the end of the next session too.
It looks like, or maybe people are more hungry than inquisitive, so there are not many questions. So, Ron, I think we'll break for lunch here. Does it work for you?
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Coming on. Thank you.
Oh, yes. Okay. Sorry. Let me paste that into the chat window. Wow, that came out bigger than I planned. Sorry. So at the top of the quick start, let me just click that link or not.
I would possibly read out the question for you.
So yeah, but just if you want to get ahead, we've got get buttons for all of those on that that link there.
The quick question, can I go ahead and ask it pretty close one, is
Sure.
how is Azure Digital Twin services different from Bentley iTwin?
Oh,
Is there
okay.
is there any connection, or is Azure just a cloud platform? Good question.
Okay, so Azure Digital Twins is a way of taking all of your source IoT data and exposing that out as a federated source, if you like. So Azure Digital Twins is not a visualization piece. It's the way of grouping together all your IoT data feeds, if I simplify it. So we actually use Azure Digital Twins as some of our backends in some of our samples.
Interesting. Nitesh, I have a direct question to you, Nitesh. What's your specialization? What are you graduating on, or what are you studying on? I mean, I'm struggling for the right word. So, are you a civil engineer, or are you a civil engineering student, or a ICT student, Nitesh? Questions are interesting. That's why. Yeah, feel free to tell me when you find time. No problem. I'm doing my master's in energy efficient and sustainable building. Wow. And you're working with, sorry, I am working in Mott McDonald as a BIM engineer. That is amazing. That's why. Okay. Interesting, Nitesh. And currently at Marine Harder in BIM team. Okay. I'm doing my master's in energy efficient. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Nitesh. Interesting. Appreciate that.
Right, I think we're good, Sri. Down to there. So just a quick preempt of what we're doing after lunch. We will run through
Using any of the Bentley tools, Nitesh?
quick start.
Yep. Thank you. Okay. What are your thoughts about taking a lunch break now, Ron, Dave, and rest of all the participants? We assemble back at 1 o'clock Melbourne time. Is that right, Ron?
Yeah, we had one scheduled from 12:15 to 1. So.
Yep. Oh, you have a session right? Is it? Oh, sorry. Okay, go on. Sorry.
No. We've got a break from 12:15 to 1
Yeah.
o'clock.
Okay. Yep. Okay. Bon appetit, all of you. We'll meet exactly at 1 o'clock. I mean, a couple of minutes earlier if you can sign in. And I think the interesting part of the run is going to happen now because you're going to get hands-on onto the product, and that's going to be interesting to understand. So go easy on the lunch, and then see you all back. And then if you can get a couple of more people in, because the actual hands-on session is happening. So if you want to use this lunchtime to call a couple of your classmates to come in, that'll also be great. Thank you all. See you at 1. And thanks, Ron. Thanks, Dave.
No worries. Do we disconnect, Sri, or stay connected? I don't mind.
Yeah, I think you can stay connected, man.
Okay, thank you. And if there's any questions, of course, just pop them in the chat.
Yep. Good afternoon to everyone in Australia, and still good morning to Adil and Subham.
Good afternoon, Shri.
Hi, Subham. Thanks for it.
Hey.
Good to see the whole audience intact. It looks like Dave has taken a break. Ron is still on. Ron?
Yeah, Dave will be back for the Q&A.
Yep, you told me, Matt. Not a problem at all. And you have your captive audience of 10 of them still.
Excellent.
Still
Get them
eagerly
off. That's a
looking
good
forward
start.
to, yeah. And then I hope they're not hungry anymore. I mean, there's no fear of losing out. So if you hope all of you had your lunch.
The danger now is they get too relaxed and snooze off.
Yeah, yep, that's right. Ron. Yeah, I think before really Ron starts on, before the end of the session, 10 of you, if you can just quickly tell me what, by the end of the day, you don't have to tell me now, though, what's your inspiration to take it on iTwin learning. So I can see that Nitesh is possibly trying to use the digital twin in the design part of it. But if each one of you can give me your thoughts on what inspires you about iTwin and why are you investing your time, that'll be pretty useful to us by the end of the day. So I'll now shut up and hand it over to Ron. Ron, it's all yours. Stage is yours, Ron.
Okay, thanks, Shri. Cheers. Right, so this afternoon's two sessions are sort of code along with me sessions. You don't necessarily have to do that. That's fine if you're just looking to see more of the availability of what you can do in the visualizer. That's fine as well. Tomorrow we'll be covering off some of the ancillary background services that we also supply. But if you do want to code along, would be great if you've got Visual Studio Code, Node.js, and Git installed. If not, I will show you another way to do that at the end of the first topic. All right, so Visual Studio Code is our recommended editor and debugger. It's free and open source as well, and it includes a nice GUI for working with Git. So typically we use that internally in Bentley for anything that's not, things like C++, C# sort of projects. Git is our source code control system for iTwin repositories. I should also say, for those of you who are new to any sort of code work, if I say something that confuses you or you're not sure what a term means, feel free to whack something in the chat. That's fine. We're all here to learn. We all start with nothing, so now's as good time as any to pick up some of that terminology. Node.js is a back-end JavaScript runtime, and what we do is we take the code that you type in TypeScript and we convert that to JavaScript, and then Node basically executes that in the back end. I'm sure you already know what Chrome or Edge does. Now I'm committing the cardinal sin here of actually coding in a Teams session, so my apologies if things go wrong. I'm sure they will. The code gods never smile upon people who code in a Teams session. What I've done is I've started a new incognito window. Now you don't need to do that, but the reason that I've done it is because I'm a Bentley employee, all my stuff automatically logs in. So we're going to run through this get started tutorial together. I'll explain some things along the way so that when you come to do this in anger, perhaps on your own at a later stage, the information that you're being asked for will hopefully make sense. In order to...
I'm going to jump in there, Ron. Sorry.
Yep.
So if you can enable the text chat for all of them so that, if they have a question, they can immediately type it out. So,
sure.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Feel free, guys, text out because coding is fairly an intensive one. So let's make it interactive and Let's make Ron's life slightly difficult. Okay.
Oh, thanks, buddy. All right, so we will do the get started tutorial. We've got some other stuff at the end as well. So if you want to, if you're proficient at coding and you want to go ahead, that's fine as well. I will explain all the steps along the way. But before you get started though, we need to implant the Bentley chip in you. That was a joke, by the way. But you need a Bentley login account in order to register applications and iModels and stuff like that. So in order to create your Bentley account, if you don't have one already, if you go to IMS, so Identity Management Services, that's short for, .bentley.com. Oops, and somehow that shot over there, which is not where I wanted it to go. Here we go. Get rid of that new tab. That will take you to a login page that looks like this. Now, I understand that probably none of you actually have a Bentley account, and that's fine. What we do is we provide a nice little link down the bottom here to register now. And in here, you can type in your email address. And that's optional. And just fill in the details here with a password and so on and so forth. Now, I've already created my account as part of the lead up to the tutorial. I'll give you a couple of moments to fill that information in. Good idea to remember what you put in your password. Hit the create account, and you should receive an email once that's done. Let me give you 30 seconds to run that one through. If anyone has any dramas, please tap out in the chat window. Alrighty, there's nothing in the chat window. I'm assuming that all went smooth for everybody. That's fantastic. So on the
just want to make sure. Sorry, have you enabled the chat for the attendees?
Yeah, they can chat on the.
Okay, buddy. Thanks.
Right, so that was our get started. All right, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create the app. And in order to do that, we're going to take a copy of the source app from GitHub, and we're going to put that on our machine somewhere so that we can manipulate that source. Now, the source is sort of disconnected, so whatever you do here doesn't affect anything back in GitHub. And it all becomes your own. So if you break it, you don't break anyone else's, that's fine. It's all good there. Now, typically I start VS Code and do it, but you can do it all from a command prompt if you like. So let me, you can't see me typing in, but I'm just starting Visual Studio Code, which of course is going to open up where I last was for someone else. Close that folder. All right, then I typically run a new terminal here, and I will change to my directory where I want to stick that new code base in. Now, when you create the app, it creates a subfolder under that directory. So whatever directory you've got listed here, your app will go into a subfolder underneath there. Let me hop ahead here. Okay, so once we've started Visual Studio, opened up a little terminal window and changed to a folder, we can then spawn our copy of the app. Oh, yeah, I can't copy and paste from here, into Visual Studio Code. Let me just jump back to the getting started tutorial. So to make things nice and easy, I'm just going to copy from the tutorial page and paste that into my Visual Studio Code terminal window. Now, before I actually hit enter on that, you'll see that there's a your-app-name section here. So I'm just going to call this my first spa. And we'll talk about different types of apps a bit later on in the session as well. All right, I've changed the name there. I'm going to run that. And what we'll find is that will create a subfolder under my RMIT called My First Spa here. And it's now basically cloning or copying down all that information that's stored in that GitHub repository, and it's going to pop it all into that folder for me. Now this will take 5 or so minutes, so while that's running in the background, probably will not that long, we'll have a bit of a chat about what's coming up. So when you work with an iTwin app, you need an application to connect to. Now there's different types of applications, and for the tutorial we're going to cheat and register one here. However, if I go to my apps page, now in order to see that, it's going to ask me to sign in. So that's why we got you to create a sign in just before.
And when you're doing that, a quick question from Nitesh again. Can you run that again? Run what again, Nitesh? Do you want him to repeat that access? The initial setup, is it? Okay. Ron, I think Nitesh is looking for quick run of the initial setup again, please.
Okay, no worries. So I'm going to assume that you've grabbed all of those. If you're good to go, let me just Alt-tab my way through life here. Where are we? And the initial part to create yourself a login is you go to ims.bentley.com. And don't have an account registered now, unless you've got a Bentley account, of course, but I imagine you won't. Fill in your email address, first name, surname, country, and give yourself a password. And you should get a welcome email once that's done, or a please verify email once that's been done. So with that account, that's not the after. Okay, there it is. With that, it'll ask you to authenticate that. So as part of the application, let me just check and make sure everyone's okay. Did that help, Nitesh, or do you need me to back up a little there? ms.bentley.com, create yourself an account.
Are you across that now, Nitesh?
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, good. Great.
All right. Right, so as part of the tutorial, we're going to register an application. Now there's different styles of applications that you can use. So for us, we're using a web page where everything's all rolled up into one, if that makes sense, typically called a spa, but we can register different types of apps. So you may have one that has no human interaction at all, no visualizer, et cetera, and you can create those against your account. Oops, go in with my Bentley account here. Clearly, Chrome remembers my password because I have no idea what it is. All right, so I'm going to post that in the chat window now, just to make life easy for everybody. So against the My Apps, you'll see I've already got a couple, but you can register your new applications here. So after today, we're going to do a spa today, a single page web app, but you can go and do traditional web apps, services, desktop, mobiles. Actually, we'll probably do a desktop one later on as well. And we'll come back and refer to this page as we proceed through the tutorial, just so I can show you where things sit and why they sit where they sit. All right. This is not something that you'll do often, so good to get a bit of a fundamental understanding of where that stands. All right, so under Get Started, we're up now to step 2 is running. We don't need to wait for it to finish. We can do step 3, and that's to register an application. Different types of application require different types of registration. So for a SPA or a single page web app, there's redirect URIs and so on and so forth. If we're using something like a service where it's just a machine to machine with no human interaction, we get a different type of authentication mechanism. So this page is really about saying this application can perform these types of tasks, and this is how we log into that application. Now, for the first one, we're going to register it automatically on the web page by clicking the register button over here. So I'm just going to click that now. If you're not signed in, it will ask you to sign in, so you can't create an app without having a Bentley account. And it will do its little spinny thing and then go and create an application for me. So we can actually see that that's happened. If I go here and back to my apps, we can see that I've got a web application quick start tutorial on the 5th of the 7th, 2022. So that's the one it just created there, and it ends in SOXX, which will be the same as what's spat out here. So the good thing about using the quick start tutorial is you don't have to jump between them, but I think having an idea of why and where things are happening makes life a bit easier in the long term. All right, let me check on Visual Studio to see how I'm going. Yay, it's all done. So in order to, if I get too far ahead as well, please feel free to slow me down. So we've got a registered application, and Visual Studio Code's done, so that's a good start. What we're also going to do is get the system to create us an iModel. So this can take a minute or two while it clones out an iModel for us. Now, of course, you can create your own iModel. So if you've got your own CAD content or an IFC file or something that you want to use as your own sample data, you can certainly do that on your own. For this one, we'll keep it nice and simple, and we'll just get the system to create one for us as well. It's going to be a retail building sample, and I'm just going to click the create button there also. And what will happen is it'll spit out a bunch of text that looks sort of similar to this with the identities of that iModel into the system there. Now, what that's doing in the background is on developer.bentley.com, under my little sign-in icon here on the side, I've also got a My iModels entry in that menu. So I can come down here and you can see that I may have created this before, but there's also a create button here that allows you to create an iModel from here. So if you're using the quick start tutorial, which we'll use over the next 2 days, but you're looking for something a bit different and you want to create a different style of iModel or even bring your own in, we'll come back and have a chat about using this create button, pardon me, to pull your data in to make your own iModel in the system here. All right, and that's all finished up as well. So the primary information that we need is the application information, so where the sign-in callback is, and you'll see why that's important, the scopes that are being used, and we're going to fidget with those later, and also the iTwin and the iModel ID. So remembering that the iModel is our container that shows off our federated 3D CAD data. So where we're pulling IFC files, DGNs, SmartPlant 3D. This iTwin ID is actually a thing called a project, and we'll chat about that a bit more tomorrow. But the project is where you put all your security and access rights. So to say, if I want to get Shri into my project, I would actually add him as a participant to this project's ID. And it's all created in the background for our sample app, but we'll take a bit more of a deep dive on those tomorrow. Right, so with Visual Studio Code finished and my information back from my application registration and the information back from my iModel registration were actually pretty much at the end of the first tutorial. What I need to do now is I need to take that information that's in here and put that into my code in Visual Studio Code. So my app has finished. It ran the command, downloaded a bunch of stuff, and created it there. In Visual Studio Code, I'm going to open the folder. So I'm going to use this open folder command under the file menu and open that folder from my RMIT subfolder. So my first spar was what I named my application. And you'll see that there's information or source data and so on underneath that. So I'm just going to select that folder to open it in Visual Studio Code. And from here, I can then navigate into all the little codey bits that appear for that project. All right. To actually get this up and running, I need to fill in this env here. And of course, in your own applications, you can completely migrate away from the way this works. But for the quick start, it keeps things nice and simple. So you'll see that there's similar requests for information that we got given in the web page. I'm just going to flick back to the web page. We provide you a nice little copy button over here so that you can pick up the client settings. And then I'm going to jump back into my Visual Studio Code. And I'm just going to paste over the top of the first 4 lines. That's the information that comes back from. If you want to leave the first 4 lines, you can, of course, and just comment them out. But find it easier just to paste over the top of them so they all disappear. And that way, those variables that we've got here are going to be set against the information that we've got back from the web page. Now we also need to tell it the iTwin, so the project or where the iModel is housed, as well as the iModel ID, and that of course was provided by the web page as well. So I'm just going to flick back to the web page here, hit the copy button, and borrow. Whoops, don't need that one, and borrow that and pop it in here. Again, I'm just going to overwrite the existing IDs, which are blank, in the file there. All right, so our first tutorial is almost done. Nice and simple. To get that to go, I need to bring up a little terminal window in Visual Studio Code. So I'm just going to go to the terminal menu, new terminal. And from here, I can just use the package manager to start that. All right, so if I hit enter there, that is now going to basically compile all that code, and it's going to launch in my browser. All right, now just for me only, I can't use this browser because that'll use my Bentley login, and that information was not created under my Bentley login, so no one else has access to what I've just done. So I'm just going to transfer that over to here. Now the reason it hasn't popped up yet is it's still actually being compiled and getting ready to start the local server. Wait that out. And then we'll have our first iTwin viewer viewing a nice iModel. So that might be a bit, so to answer France's question there, that might be a bit advanced on the Node.js side. I think we recommend, let me see what I've got running here. So my Node.js is actually 14, so it's a pretty old version, 14.17.3. So it is possible that 18 is not one that is well supported. Just wind back into the, we actually get you to, oh, we just send you to Node.js. Okay. I would suggest 16. Yes, please. That would be good if you could downgrade. I would suggest 16. Be good. If not, 14 definitely goes. So we'll just give answer a sec to catch up. Right, so on visuals.
Ron, just for your quick information, I think the cross section of all the attendees are very, very strong in programming and programming skill, and then many of them are with subject matters as well.
Oh, okay, fantastic. Yep. All right, I can lift it up a little. That's fine, not a problem. All right, so that's now been compiled and is running against my local host in the system there. What you'll see is that the browser tab that was spawned as part of the compilation of the code is now asking you to accept the access for those scopes that we used. So these scopes limit what that user can do within the application itself. So you give the scopes to the app, and the app can do things on a person's behalf. So I'm going to just say accept here. And because I'd already logged into Bentley app before, it just signs me on, so it shouldn't ask me to sign in. It doesn't look like it's going to. And we're off and racing. So it's going to use the iTwin or the project ID from here, and the iModel ID that we gave it as well. Now, of course, if you've got others, you can change that prompt up the top. And congratulations, you've created your first iTwin viewer app.
Ooh, and let that be just the beginning.
Well, that's all I had. No, I'm just kidding. So we should do a quick tour of the app, then we'll come back and do a quick tour of the code, and then we'll move on and have a look at some other ways that you can achieve a similar goal. So the web viewer that we've given you is a bit of a slimmed down viewer. There's other tools that you can plug into it, and we're going to do that. I promise we'll get there, but let's have a quick look at what we've got in here. So by default, we've used the building sample. We can use our mouse wheel to roll in, roll out. We can use our left button to click on objects in the model. And we have things like a properties window that will show us the properties for those objects. Let me get something that's not as boring. There's the window. There we go. A door is fine. So what you'll see is that there's some information that's stamped against that. Okay, not a great deal, but some information stamped against that door in the model itself in there. So rolly wheel to roll in and out, left button to click. And if you've used Bentley tools before, we use our right mouse button to basically end or abort whatever you're currently doing. So left to pick, right to finish. Right, so the tools that we include are basic measurement tools. So things like measuring a distance, measuring the XYZ location of something. Let's rolly wheel in here. So there's the coordinates for it, pops up on the screen, etc., etc. Being able to measure a distance, and we automatically snap you to points in the system, which you can turn on and off, of course, in a programmatic sense in there as well. I won't go through each one of those. We also give you the ability to do things like create sections. So I'm going to click on this wood paneling here on the fire suppressor by the looks of it. And actually, I don't want to do that. I'm going to clip volume from element just to make my life simple. And what that'll do is that'll actually, using that element as the boundary for the view, it will clip out everything else. Now, I use my middle button then to pan and drag. So I held down my rolly wheel and I can drag that around on the screen as well. Okay, so we can clip views up. Or we'll come back and cover some of those tools. If you need to get around a bit better, the view manipulation tools are top right here, so we can use a rotate. And you'll see that the rotate allows me to snap onto something. And then I just simply move my mouse away from that location, and I can continuously do that. Give me another point here somewhere on the screen, so I can rotate that around as well. The pan tool, which also is middle button, if you hold your middle button down, you can also select it as a tool itself. This tool fits everything into the window. This one allows you to draw a box and basically zoom into that area. So if you need a bit more precision rather than sort of mouse wheeling in and out, you can certainly do that as well. And we also track the views that you've used. So if you want to roll back views, we have back view there. And if you've gone back some views, you can also go forward as well. We give you a cube, which is standard faced, so you can use right, top, left, bottom, etc., etc. You can also use portions of the cube, so you can go, for example, let's do this one. So we can go right isometric or left isometric, etc., etc. And you can grab the cube and spin it around as well. So if you're finding it hard to use the rotate view or view tool, or you can't get a snap on something, you can also grab the cube and spin it around in here. We provide you a couple of visualization tools. So there's the walk around tool, which allows you to click a point to start walking. And then as you move your mouse around forwards and backwards, it sort of zooms you around. All of the information for these tools is actually in the tool tips down the bottom here. So if you ever click on a tool and you're not sure how to use it, the tool tips will usually explain how to use that tool. So if I use the shift while I'm walking around, I can pan, and if I use control, I can have a look. So let me just start that off again. So if I use shift, I can actually go up and down instead of walking forwards. And if I use control, I can stay in that spot and look around on there as well. So if I take control off, it'll then start me walking again. And the last one is the camera tool. So by default, we put you in with perspectivity on, so that things that are close to you look bigger than the same object that's further away. Sometimes that can distort things a little bit, depending on the size of your model or the kind of information that you're trying to work with. So you can turn that camera off. So that will take the perspectivity away, so that the same thickness here is the same thickness down the bottom. Whereas if we turn that on, because the top's closer, it's going to look wider at the top than it is down the bottom. All right, to recap these, so this one is usually where we pop any ancillary tools that come with the tool that you're using. So for example, we've got here the clear measurements button, because I've placed measurements on screen. And you can see that one's stuck there, and I thought we had another one somewhere, but it doesn't matter. And we can go through and then clean up the screen by using the clear measurements. We can also click on these and actually, maybe not in the view, and delete them singly. Nope, maybe not. No, it's not going to happen today. Okay, so we can use the clear measurements tool to get rid of those. But you'll also see that my section tool disappeared, which is not meant to happen. Yeah, okay, so we also had the sectioning tools up the top here, and they allow us to do some other things. So I can clear that section. So if I want to clear that clip and get my entire model back, I can do that. Although this is going well for me. Not today. All right, let me see if I can get that to go again. Oh, that's selection. Where's my sectioning clear. Nope. All right, we seem to have minused the ability to do that. That's fine. Let me just click from that element to get the view bounding box back and get rid of that. Bug. Wouldn't be a live demo without something being exciting. All right, let me pan that out here. All right. All right, and last part of the tour is if you click on an object, you will get properties for that object. If you have that box hidden, it will not fly out again. And you can pick up these widgets and drag and drop them pretty much wherever you like on the screen as well. So I can take tree view and properties and put them, side by side up the top here. And drag these in and out. And the properties, of course, will change depending on what you've clicked on. And if you need multiples, you can use your control key to gain them. All right, last part of the tour is the tree view. Now, the tree view sort of harks back to CAD days. So this is how the model is composed. So what you'll see here is the model has certain levels or layers within that model that we can go and turn on and off the visibility in here. As well as perhaps other files that make up that model. So the model doesn't have to be all from one file. It can be, as we discussed, federated from a bit of IFC, a bit of DWG, etc., all into one location. And we can use the model tree to turn those levels, layers kind of things off as well. We also give you the categories in here. So rather than doing it from the model tree, we expose all the categories as a single sort of listing instead, and from here we can then go and turn off those categories from here too. So if there's superfluous stuff that we don't want to see in the model, we can certainly go and manipulate that to get rid of that information. And the last one is spatial containment. I don't think this one has any, nope. So if you're pulling things in from building products, they typically have a spatial allocation. So first floor, ground floor, etc. And that will demarcate the model into whatever that spatially allocated area is. We just give you a nice, neat way of being able to turn them on and off as well. So categories, think of them like layers, model tree, think of that more as the composition of files that go into making up that model in there itself. We also don't have any 2D or any of that sort of work in here. So what we provide options for turning that information on and off at the same time. All right, so that's a quick view, a quick tour of the viewer. We'll be having a look at how to create tools and how to add a widget a bit later on. But for now, I'll give 30 seconds for everyone to have a quick play around the viewer. They're probably dying to have a squiz around in there without me talking over the top. So give you some time to have a quick whiz around in there. Okay, so that code, once it's done and streamed out, it sort of runs in the browser all by itself. So I can actually disconnect if I wanted to, and this would stay active. Now, some of the things we talked about, of course, it being a sort of a tile streaming viewer, we don't really get with the smaller iModels because it's pretty quick to load, and it sort of all loads in all in a blast, and it all gets done. However, in some of the bigger ones, you'll see that it actually tiles portions of the model in and puts them in the view. Let's have a quick look at one of those now. So in developer.bentley.com, once you've signed in, you can go to the My iModels page. And from here, we can create other ones. We won't actually create our own ones because I didn't prep anyone to bring some data across, but we'll have a look at how to create some Bentley sample ones. And of course, we'll discuss the other options that are there for you as well. So for the two, we'll create Bentley sample, so we'll skip that one for now. We can do a local file. So if you've got a DGN or a .bim file, and we'll talk about that in a sec, a .iModel, which is our old format file, DWG, Revit file, for example, you can actually choose that file from here. We will take that file and convert it through the portal. Wow, there's a nice pic of me. We can take that and convert it through the portal and turn that into an iModel for you, which you can then open up in the visualizer. So you may already have something or a project that you're working on where you've already got that information there. The other option is that you can use the iTwin synchronizer tool to create something that may be federated from different bits of data and pushed up into the system. So from here, we actually provide a download link for the iTwin synchronizer. So I'm just going to chase that one. So the iTwin synchronizer is an offline, or not offline, but it's a localized synchronization tool that allows you to grab a bunch of data, let's say, DGN's CAD style data, and convert them into an iModel. It will download all the connectors required for each one, and it's just I'm just firing it up on the other screen, so I'll get it over there as soon as I can. But it will allow you to use different file types, etc., to pull that information in to an iModel that you can then reuse. So, for example, you might be pulling in multiple files in here. So we've got, for this sample, we had a Revit file and a bunch of DGNs and some more Revit data. So we can, for lack of a better word, federate all that data into a single iModel, which we can then view at once in the visualizer rather than having a model here and an iModel there and so on that we have to skip between. So we can take multiple bits and put it together. Go, Sri.
Yeah, thanks, Brett. There's a question from Mr. Franz Young. Managed to launch the server with Node.js version 14 and it does not want to run on port 3000. I mean 3000. Wow. Anyway, got to run on port 3002. On the web page, when I click the button to accept the TOS, I get error, HTTP error 426.
Oh yeah, that is definitely new to me. That's a good one. 302 would probably mean you've got something else running on port 3000 if it doesn't want to run on port 3000. And I'm not sure what would cause the 426 for the acceptance there. Maybe you can cancel, if you Control-C to terminate the batch job and try firing it off again. Is anyone else having issues like Francis? Has anyone else got a working visualizer going?
Yeah. And if everyone else is coding along with Ron, hopefully. If you're not, just tell me no. Thank you.
Yeah, it's definitely not a requirement, by the way.
Yeah, and Dr. Franz is a senior lecturer, information technology, RMIT. So I like it. Ron, somebody really testing you.
Great.
Thanks, Dr. Franz, for joining in.
Yes. Yeah, I don't know what else could be running on port 3000, unless you've got some other app or something else running there that's hogging that port. Let me restart that. So as I said, it will continue to run without that. So yeah, here we go. There it is.
He says there's no other Node.js app running, but But you try that again. I'm more interested in the simulation modeling aspect of the digital twin. Good one. I'm going to be talking to you later, but go on with the session today and tomorrow. So I will connect with you to find out how we can work further.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Sri.
Yep.
Awesome. Why is that presenting banner in the way? Get out of the way. I can't see what I'm clicking on. There we go. Okay, so iTwin Synchronizer allows you to pull them together. It's a desktop-based tool, runs on PC, not on Mac, and it allows you to create a new connection where you can define where you're going to stick all the information into and what files you're going to put in there. So if you've got more than one file, you definitely need something like the iTwin Synchronizer tool to take all that and put it together. If you've got, say, a single Revit file or something else that you're trying to do, you can use this local file option here to put that information together. Now, if you want to create an offline model, let's say you're working on a desktop, you're working in disconnected mode, we have another tool called, iTwin Snapshot, and I will paste the link into the chat window in a second. Here we go. The iTwin Snapshot tool is also a version of iTwin Synchronizer. So let me get that fired up here on my desktop as well. And it allows you to create using the exact same technology that iTwin Synchronizer does, only instead of creating it in an online iModel that's serviced from the Bentley cloud, it allows you to create a localized file. So it allows you to create a .bim file is what we call it, locally, and you can then interact with that locally. So its workflow is slightly different because we're not hosting that file in the cloud, but we're creating it locally on your machine and hosting it from there. One of the benefits with the iTwin Snapshot tool is when you get to stage 2, so after you've created your own, we actually bundle it up with an Electron app, so an Electron app is a JavaScript app that runs on your desktop. It still runs in a browser, but it's not it's unleashed from the traditional web app restrictions. So it has access to your file system and stuff like that, which you can then click on in here and it will actually launch that. We'll also have a look at creating your own later on in the tutorial as well. So a couple of different ways of getting your model, iTwin Snapshot if you're looking for offlining, as well as iTwin Synchronizer if you're looking to post it into the cloud. So iTwin Synchronizer only posts into the cloud. You can use the local conversion tool, local file conversion tool as well. So that's a portal system that allows you to create one. Good for single models, won't work if you want multiple, Revit, DGN, DWGs all stuck into one model. So this desktop starter app is the iModel viewer that comes with the iTwin Snapshot. We'll actually go through and create one of these a bit later. You can see, again, it has the same basic tools. I won't cover those right now. All right, so we're going to create a different model just so we can see some of that tiling streaming. So I'm going to use the Bentley sample. And for the Bentley sample, we give you a couple of different types. So we've got a metro station, a stadium, the retail building sample, which you've already used, a smaller house sample. So if you do the accreditation course, we actually use the house sample as part of the courseware, which I'll pop a link to later on. A process plant. So if you're doing oil and gas kind of stuff, we give you a sample process plant in there as well. And if you're doing long linear type work, we give you a sample for Coffs Harbour, which gives you roads, alignments, bridges, a couple of other things in there too. So to create one of those, you just select the one that you want. We'll take, there's something that's a bit, probably Coffs Harbour will do. And I'm just going to give it a name. Within this, we can actually invite other people to participate. So if you're work sharing or you want other people to be able to run the viewer against this same iModel, I can add their emails in here and they'll be added to the dummy sample project that we create for that. In this case, I don't have anyone else to add. So I'm just going to create a Coffs demo using the Coffs Harbour template. I'm going to save that. And what will happen is the web page will come back when it's finished cloning the Coffs Harbour sample model into a project, and you'll be able to use the show button at the end of the line, which will actually show you what the iTwin ID is and the iModel ID. So for each sample iModel you create, we stick them in a separate secure bucket, if you like, as opposed to the content of the model itself. And there's certainly, when you create your own iTwins, basically the container that holds your iModels, you can certainly have more than one iModel in that container. It's not necessarily a one-to-one prospect. All right, that's probably taken a bit longer than I thought it was going to. But once you get that iTwin ID and the iModel ID, you can change those back in your env file, rerun your code, and it will switch to that iModel. So let me see if that Coffs one's done. Nope, still going. I might cheat and use one that I've used before. Or not. There we go. Perfect timing. Coffs demo, show. So there's my information for the model I just created. Just going to go back into VS Code. And I'm going to use Control-C to terminate that running. And I will just hash these out because we can switch backwards and forwards. And I'm just going to paste those in there. Now when I start that up, get it compiled, launch in the wrong browser. I'll just do this. There, let me get rid of some of this. So remember, I'm running in an incognito just so it doesn't use my Bentley login. That's the only reason. That way you know there's no tricks up my sleeve. Right, I'm just waiting for your studio to get that server started. Well. And if Shri gets some more funding for faster PCs, that would be fantastic.
Sri just signed out, Matt. Thank you.
Almost there, surely.
When he's running it, and then when I put my application for a faster PC, let's see which runs faster anyway, my application or even. Just a quick feedback, Dr. Franz Chiang, a consulting project on modeling and simulation on multidisciplinary team for a consulting project to improve the distribution operation of an auto part retailer. The team consisted of colleagues with expertise in GIS, supply chain, and information system. Dr. Franz's role was to develop a simulation model of the distribution operation for simulating various distribution scenarios. Interesting, Dr. Franz. I mean,
it's interesting.
Yep. We surely need to have a conversation to find out how iTwin can help you out in any of the research and consulting work. Hardcore programming.
Definitely. Fantastic. Oh, beautiful. Okay, perfect segue. Okay, so this is the Coffs Harbour model that I just created using the new iTwin ID and iModel ID. The reason I did this is if you keep an eye down here at the bottom of the screen, as I rolly wheel in, you'll see that there's a marker that says something of something. So that's the tiling service. So the back-end tiling service is now taking that data, chunking it up into tiles, and then sending it to you in the same way that Google Maps works. So we'll see things start to pop in, and eventually the information will sort of clean itself up for our level of detail. So that gives us the ability to host those super huge, you know, a 10-kilometer oil and gas plant, for example, data within the system without it impacting performance, because we work in the same method that Google Maps uses. All right, so once you've got that browser made as well, I just wanted to note that you can come back here, of course, and change these. So I took a snapshot. I can't remember what order I snapped them in, so this may not work right, but it'll be a good guess. Anyway, let's see what happens. So we can certainly change the URL, and of course I flipped them around the wrong way. And that one. Okay, and we're back to the original web application quick start one that we started off with, which was the house. Alrighty, so congratulations, built your first one. That's fantastic. Well done. I'll just pause here for a sec, just in case anyone wants to say they're having issues, troubles, any questions. Now we're good. It's typing. Okay. All right, so that was great, Ron. Thank you for putting me through all that pain. What else can we do? So we also have a way of quick starting up the visualizer. Now, the downsides to using the sandbox is that it's purely limited to using iTwin stuff only. Right, so you can't pull in libraries from other locations. So if you want to use, you know, XLJS, you can't do that in the sandbox. However, what the sandbox does let you do, it lets you do anything you want in the visualizer or with the iTwin API. So let's choose that. So in iTwin org, there's a sandboxes area. You can work without a Bentley account, even though you need a Bentley account here, and you can go and create your own. So you can have a look at the existing sandboxes. I'm not sure why that link didn't launch. Let's try that again. Go. And I'll just pop that into my incognito view as well, so you know there's nothing up my sleeve. And I'll paste that in the chat window too. All right, so the sandboxes allow you to create new ones. So if you've got a Bentley sign-in, you can certainly create sandbox. You can share these with anyone. They're not available for you to use with your own iModel, so it's all sample-based models only. And as I said, you can only use code that's coming from the iTwin product base. You can't actually bounce outside and start pulling in third-party libraries into there. There's a bunch of existing sandboxes, and we typically use these for code share with customers, which is great because they're non-customer specific, and they typically focus on a thing. So for example, if you wanted to know how to turn off categories in a model, we can make you up a nice little widget in a sandbox that says this is how you hide categories programmatically, of course, not through the GUI in there. The sandboxes are hosted out of the US, which makes running them from AU a tad slower than you'd like, but okay, that was interesting. Or they don't work at all today. Here we go. Going on here. Let's try this one. Okay, so it looks like we may have accidentally broken sandboxes overnight, because they were certainly working yesterday. Let me try another one. And now I've hit the definition of insanity. Right, so I won't be able to show you sandboxes, but you can, however, go ahead and create your own. We won't create one, but you can use a geometry template, which is a blank iModel. So again, we talked about the mobile equipment scenario where you're moving a bus around. That would be great for a blank model. Bring up Bing Maps, drawing your bus, off you go. But if you want a basic viewport sample, which is similar to what we just did in Visual Studio Code, then you can go through and create a basic viewport sample, which will ask you to pick what model you want to use or a selection of, so you can flick between models in the code and then give it a nice name, and it'll create a sandbox for you. I'm going to create one, even though it probably won't work. Let me just tick all these on. Yep, it's not going to run, which will then pop the code on the left, the viewer on the right, and then you can code along in here. And of course, I can then share that sandbox with anybody that I want to. Bummer. That takes me to the next thing. So we've got sandboxes in there. We've got community sandboxes as well. So if you're looking for any samples, any sample code that we may not have released as components in GitHub, often we've done like a little tutorial in the community sandbox. I'm hoping it'll show you the sandboxes we've got available. That's not all of them. There should be more, but that's not too bad. And so these also show up on Google. Right. So some of let's get some of the boring stuff out of the way. So the API is accessible at iTwin.js.org. There's also a bunch of other getting started tutorials and samples in there. You can see all the API calls for all of our packages. So we've got cores and schema editing and writing connectors and all that sort of stuff in there as well. You can also search in here. So if you're looking for something nondescript, like you want to create a point, or let's say we want to create a tool. So we want to use the core front end tool, or we want to do something with the camera path. But what you'll see is our sandboxes are also indexed in here, and our samples as well. So rather than sort of blindly searching through sandboxes or the samples, you can come straight to the reference at iTwin.js.org and search in there, and then I can just filter these down. So you'll see that if you create sandboxes, yours will also appear in here as well. So we index everybody's sandboxes and samples in here too. So keep the sandboxes as something light, something nondescript. Certainly don't put any IP in there, but just put the generalization about what you're doing with the tool. So that's the best way to cheese that along. So Bentley account, blank iModel, and it gets you into one in an instant start. All right, so we also have samples in a different area, and it doesn't matter, it can stay in. Actually, probably not. Let me, no, that'll be fine. We also have samples that you can use. Some of these are hosted as part of the sandboxes. Some of them are just standalone samples that you can grab from GitHub as well. We try to tag them up. So if you're looking for something specific, like iTwin platform APIs, you know, maybe doing clash detection or issues resolution or something, you can go and filter on those as well within the system there. All right, so while we're in here, let's have a quick look at some of the features of the iTwin platform, so the viewer features. So we've got things like being able to change the background color, running things like the camera path. Recently out, there's a nice Medium article that the developer wrote for this one, which is the car particle effect. Let's launch that one in. Very proud of herself. But if you're doing things with reality data, we show you how to create classifiers from that reality mesh. So the reality mesh is inherently dumb. It's just triangles with a nice image attached to it. We also give you examples for cross-probing. Let's open that one up and keep that one in as well. If you're pulling, we should start up here. So the ability to, do simplistic stuff like how to emphasize elements. So if you wanted to direct someone's input to say, hey, you need to look at this information, we show how to get those IDs and emphasize those. how to create things like exploded views, which may be good for some of your simulation modeling that you were looking at previously. Because it's WebGL, we've also added in things like, creating particle effects. So if you want to create fire or smoke or some sort of simulation in against those. We give you the ability to put things like decorators on screen. So you'd create your bus, your mobile equipment, for example, as a decorator, as opposed to model geometry. If you are using some of the advanced tools that allow you to hypermodel, so that's where you create a section in place and you can reference the 2D geometry directly in place. We give you that. I won't go through each one of these, but suffice to say that if you can think of something that's not in here, please let us know. We love to create examples for those as well. The most two that you'll commonly use. Okay, so this one's an example of using something outside the box. So this is using open street data to route mobile equipment, so cars, along set paths. So it's a good example if you're looking for something that's not necessarily iTwin CAD BIM related and looking for something else to do within that modeling scenario. So none of this at all has any CAD in it. It's all open street data and all the cars are imagined. And this is also one of the more common uses for the iTwin, is being able to go from something that's a schematic, which is how general process works, obviously, but taking that back up into a contextual layer of the 3D model. So being able to click on something that's in a schematic and having it take you to that object. So here we've got a pump, and having it take you to that object in the 3D model, or vice versa. So if we grab the vessel here and being able to pull up the schematic for that vessel instead. All right, where do we get to? We were going to borrow some code. Okay, how's our timing going? Sorry, I got windows going everywhere here. Okay, so we're sort of blending into the visualizer and the API when we borrow some code. So what we might do is, if anyone needs a quick refresh or a comfort break, we might just pause for a couple of minutes. That's okay?
Yep, good idea.
And then we'll continue on.
We'll reassemble in 10 past 2 or possibly 15 past.
Okay, 10 past sounds good.
Yep.
Good to continue on. All right.
Yep.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, so as we discussed, the template as it comes is a React component. So we create a React functional component here, and there's a bit of login, toing and froing, of course. But ultimately, in the end, we actually return out the viewer container that that does that. So you can embed this in a page. It could be a spa with tabs on the side, all sorts of wonderful and good stuff. One of the joys of Visual Studio Code is that this will compile on the fly. So once we've got this up and running, I can make changes to this and it will actually compile and update in the web browser straight away, pretty much. So it's a nice development area to work in. I was going to pinch some of the sandbox stuff, but since sandboxes aren't working, it's a bit hard for you to go from one to the other to understand. So I thought we might deviate a little from the plan, which is always a great thing to do on Teams and code. And that is jump down into and just yank one of our GitHub components across and put it into there as well. If you're looking for something simplistic to do, or you want to know more about widgets, you can certainly do the iTwin Viewer Hello World customization. So that's under learning at developer.bentley.com under tutorials, and it's actually the second one there. But I thought we might take it a little bit further and just yank in a component that we'll use tomorrow for the reporting services and get that done today instead. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to create a new widget, so a new tab over here on the side. We're going to use one that we've already been supplied with. just to make life easy. But if you're looking to do some more interactive stuff, depending on the time, we can probably come back and do this together as a group as well. So in GitHub on iTwin, we provide a bunch of different repositories. So we've got iTwin JS Core, we've got React UX standards that we use at Bentley. We also, oh good, I'm logged in as this. Okay, so we've also got a bunch of private ones, which we don't want to chat about, but if you want to build your own connectors to your own style of CAD tools or some data that's coming across that we don't rip into, you can certainly do that. That's the connector framework here. We provide admin tools to create things like those projects or those iTwin IDs that we were talking about, to manage them, to add users, all that sort of stuff. But for this, what we'll do is we'll just use some of the viewer components that we publish, and we'll pull 2 of those into the package. So I'm just going to delve in here just so you can see what it is that we're looking at. So we've got things in here like a geo tool where you can type in your address and we'll take you to that spot on Earth. So Google Mappy kind of thing. But we're going to have a look today at the grouping and mapping widget and also at the reports configuration widget. But there's samples in here for things like carbon analysis, the extra measure tools. If you're using our SenseMetrics IoT interface, we've also got the SenseMetrics infrastructure IoT sample in here too. We also provide things like little neat tools like extra React hooks and things like that. But anyway, so what we're going to do today is we're going to yank the grouping and mapping widget into our existing one. Now it's going to be probably a little bit more difficult than I'd like, but we'll proceed along and see how we go. Adding the components is actually quite straightforward. What we need to do though is we need to be able to log out of the iTwin viewer because we're going to add some additional scopes in. So this is going to take us back over some of the information that we've done previously in the form of adding in the new widget as well. Right, so with most of our samples, we actually give you a nice little README that details sort of what the sample does, as well as how you actually can integrate that into your own tooling. We usually tell you what the permissions and scopes required are and how to get that onboarded in your tool, as well as the iTwin ID permissions. And we'll come and actually have a quick chat about that tomorrow when we do the other API informational portal. So the Spark client that we used for our iTwin viewer must have these additional scopes. So that's insights, read and modify, and projects read. So if I go back to wherever all my portal stuff went, here we go, and I go to my apps and to my quick start tutorial that I created today, you'll see that the scopes that were created with that tooling are iModel Access Read and Reality Data. Now against those scopes, we can add more in, and that depends on what APIs we want to use as to what scopes we want to give our app. Right, there's an argument for just adding all the scopes in, but typically you don't want to do that because that allows an app to maybe breach its confines of what you're trying to achieve within that application itself. Down the bottom are the API associations that are covered by the scopes up the top here. So we've currently added something from visualization, we've currently added something from iModels group and Reality Data group. So if we wanted to, we're writing code that modified an iModel, we'd need to give that permissions. In this case, we're not doing that. So we actually need to add in insights, which is a completely separate product group, and projects in there as well. So from here, I'm just going to shrink that. I'm going to add in APIs. And you'll see that we've actually got quite a few. And a lot of these will cover not all the tools. We'll gloss over some of them tomorrow as we explore what other APIs are there for you. But today we're chasing reporting and insights. So we want reporting, not reality data analysis, and we'll probably use OData tomorrow. So I'm just going to pinch that at the same time. And for projects, that's lumped in under administration up here. So I can add in, of course, the entire product group if I wanted to, but we don't really need the user bits. So we'll just add in projects out of administration, and OData and reporting for reporting and insights. All right, once that's done, we hit the save button here, and that will add those scopes in. And as you can see, we've added in more than what the app requires, but just in the interest of moving right along, we'll keep going on there anyway. So really, we only needed those 3 of those last 4 into that scope allocation in here. So they were done in the env file, and there's an auth client scopes area in that env, and I'm just going to paste those ones into there. Now, unfortunately, the env file is not dynamically recompiled, so we do have to can our application. So I'm going to can it anyway, and I will come back and add in those extra bits you need. So those scopes from that window went in on the client scopes line, and I just paste them inside the double quotes at the end of the line there. All right, and the rest is follow the requirements for the components. So we need to import the grouping and mapping widget, and all of this lives in our app.tsx. I'm just going to, excuse me while I tab backwards and forwards between a couple of things here. Just paste that in up the top here, so we know it's new. Now, because that hasn't been installed, if you like, into our project, we're going to have to use the package manager to load that in. So I tell the package manager to install that package. So same thing if you wanted, if you're working with XL.js, for example, you would npm install whatever its full package is. We've got no restrictions on your own local code of what packages you pull in or where and what you use them from. All right, that's nicely done. Okay, so that package has been pulled. The other requirement was to add it into the UI providers for the viewer. So when the viewer loads, it loads an array of user interface providers, and they could be tools, they could be widgets, they could be whatever. In this case, it's a widget, so it's a panel on the side. It's not a press button tool, and we're going to tell it, or we're going to add this into the array of the UI providers that's in our app. So I'm just going to scroll down to the bottom here, where all that is, and you can see that for UI providers, we're adding in a couple already. So if you didn't want the measure tools, for example, you're writing an app and you don't want people to have those tools, we can just eliminate that out of the UI providers, and those won't be added in there. I'm just going to add that in. Now, because we've logged in and the information is cached, it doesn't allow us to update the scopes against our user permissions. So I'll show you what that looks like. So if I npm start, and I know it'll take a little while to get running. Where is it? Nope. Nope. Be one of these. Unless I closed it already. I closed it already. No, it's flicked me into the other browser. All right, here we are. Okay, doesn't matter. You never have too many iTwin viewers running. That's what I say. There it is. Let's get rid of that. All right, so what actually happens is because the sign-in is cached in the browser, it's going to basically try and reuse my cached credentials with the new viewer that's starting up with the changes to the scopes, which creates some interesting results. Basically, we'll get warnings to say that we're not authorized to do some things. So if you're ever changing the scopes on your app, you need to make sure that you log out first. Unfortunately, and I had this debate with internal dev this week, there is no easy way to actually log out of the iTwin sample that we provide for the tutorial. So we're going to force that to happen in a different way. Once we get in there. Go. And I understand Dave will be back shortly. We are running out of time, so I'll try and hurry this along. Okay, so we get these nice little toasts up the top here to say, hey, you're unauthorized to do this operation. And that's because the scopes for our cached credentials haven't been updated. So we don't have those insight read, insight write, et cetera, project toolings that we really want to use this new widget that's magically appeared over this side here. So that's the new UI that we just added, the grouping and mapping widget. Which we'll come to see what that does. So in order to do that, we're going to need to tell the viewer to log out. And this is where the code recompiling on the fly works in our favor, because we can add some stuff in and then take some stuff out. So let's find an appropriate place to stick this. It doesn't really matter, I guess. I'll have to scroll up and find it. All right, so the auth client is what's actually causing us to sign in. So we're going to tell the auth client to sign out, which is going to create some excitement. So we just need to position that somewhere nice where it'll get run again. What are you doing? Okay, so it'll dynamically compile. Oh, okay, it's missing that dependency. Let me completely stuff up the code and shove it up here instead. So either way, we want to force it. It's bad. It's just going to log out. But we'll just get rid of that login, and which should be throwing us some weird errors on this side, right? So it's now gone crazy over here, as you can see. So if I chop this off and refresh that, it won't actually give us a proper login. It'll log in, log out, and cause all sorts of craziness. Yep, so it takes us straight to log out. Okay, so once that's done, so we should have logged out. I'm just going to comment this thing out here. Again, it'll recompile on the fly. Okay, nice and simple change, and I'll just going to refresh that in a faster manner. Okay, it obviously didn't log me out. So let me. That here instead. Maybe it's using my cache credentials for somewhere else. Maybe I didn't wait long enough. It's definitely logged out. It's stuck in a log out, log in sort of loop. So that should be the end of it. Let me can that whole session there, and we'll give it another go. Joys of coding on the fly. Let's go. All right. No. Great. Okay, that that probably wraps up our session for today. I think Dave's about to come back on for 2:30 for Q&A.
Yep. We won't give him 2 minutes, otherwise we will do the Q&A tomorrow. Or you can take the cue and give them the A.
For sure.
Meanwhile, let me ask the people. So, give me a reaction. How was the session so far? All of you are free to chat. I mean, free for a chat box. So, go ahead, please. You know, they always told me for a musician and for a fine art person and a teaching staff, the most motivating thing is when people respond back and then say, oops, you've done well, you've not done well. So Ron spending his whole day today, let's give him something to smile or not to smile, but then let's give him some feedback, please.
I have a feeling I've put them all to sleep. Sure, sorry. I would also like to say that unfortunately we can't do the Omniverse session tomorrow. That's because we're a public company, it hasn't actually gone through everything yet. So
okay,
we can't do Omniverse tomorrow, but I'm happy to fill that void. I mean, we can finish early or we can do something else in that void.
Yep. Let's see how the mood is, and then any specific questions, please go ahead and shoot. Dave is here. Hi, Dave.
Afternoon all.
So if you have any questions to Dave or any questions to Ron, I'm sure you have no questions to me.
Don't sell yourself short.
That's the most privileged position to be there. You can do everything, but nobody can question you. I'll give you a minute or two more. If there is any questions, please. Otherwise, I'll give you back 15 more minutes in your life. This session is recorded, so after the tomorrow session is done, we will send you the record for you to go through it, at least on demand. Okay. Oh, joined the session a bit late. We'll like to ask if there is, oopsie, sorry, that went off quickly.
There definitely is. So if you head to developer.bentley.com and go to the samples, you can use those samples as source learnings, but the tutorials that we ran through today in the sessions are under learning tutorials. We did the first one together as a group, and we sort of tried to achieve the second one, but failed, unfortunately. Get that one pulled together. But these three will certainly set you on the path. The other tutorial here is the accreditation course. So if you're looking at pulling in IoT data from some sort of source, the accreditation course will actually take you through that from start to finish for the house model.
Good on you. It looks like Dr. Franz ran it on Firefox.
Firefox should be okay. I haven't used it in a long time. Should be okay.
Kun, what recording you're unable to open because I think it is still not for you now. We're still recorded and we will publish it for you if you're talking about our sessions recording today. You may not be able to open it today. We will publish it and then you will be able to open. This is answering a question from Kun. Sure thing, Kun. I'm going to put somebody on spot. Irfan, how did you find it, Matt? Just text. Good. Yep, Irfan. You can and then join the session tomorrow, Irfan. You'll find it more interesting tomorrow for the kind of plan what Griffith has and you and me have. Yep, friend. I think we are any of this kind of workshop in over 2 days. This is answering Dr. Franz. It's a kind of you feel an information overload bit of it, but then looking at your experience, I mean, you should be able to assimilate it over a cup of coffee.
In the same chest. So we're not going away either. So feel free to reach out to us after the course. This is no means the end of our partnership at all. It's,
absolutely,
definitely stay in touch with us.
Is on the slight lighter side of it for Dave and Ron is that it looks like Dr. Franz tried sunny weather in Queensland for a little while, for 1 year, and he is the best bet for Melbourne being a most livable place. 21 years in Melbourne, and just 1 year with QOT.
Not everyone can handle our lifestyle, sure.
You know what? It's probably warmer down in Melbourne today than it is here.
That's right, Matt. That's right. I've never seen 4 hours of sun beaming at me in Melbourne continuously. So I think Ron's got a magic with his coding. So the sun is all listening to him. There's something interesting from before. Oh, you are in Mauritius, are you? Then you should meet Irfan. Irfan is from Mauritius, Dr. Franz. Irfan is a PhD candidate, a student from Griffith University on geotech, and he's a dal roti man. If you buy Irfan dal roti, he will submit 2 more PhD theses. Irfan, his name is Irfan, as in IRFAAN. If you look at the attendees in. He's an exceptionally sharp gentleman. He worked with Bentley Education to create a curriculum for 120 hours of learning on linear infrastructure. I'm talking about Irfan, Dr. Fran. He actually learned 6 of our products to go back and teach the student because we work on a system of train the trainer. So, the whole linear infrastructure starting from concept design to road design to bridge design to building design to construction management, well level construction management, not a deep dive. If one can handle it. Irfan, you better buy me a lunch mat. Okay. Any more questions? I have one request, all 10 of you. I would be delighted to see you all again tomorrow. More the better. So if you can use, you saw how the session is. If you can get in more people, because tomorrow it's completely new session about APIs. It is not that it's not like any of those what do you call the English soap opera where you miss the first one, you don't get the second one. So it's not like that. So you can always jump in and understand that. Please come along tomorrow because it's the first time initiative, honestly, on a iTwin being given to academia and a session, and Ron and Dave are one of the most expensive resources from Bentley. And possibly if Dave and Rob had spent this time on a commercial market today, they would be billing heavily. So, I mean, the point I'm trying to say is that is about we are very keen on the academic market and we are ready to throw any resources, but then it has to be equally reciprocated with a level of interest and participation. So my humble submission is to come back tomorrow also. Okay, time for me to, if there is no more questions, then thank you all, and a huge thanks goes to, in the same order, Ron. Thank you, Ron. Appreciate it, man. Really appreciate that.
Anytime, Sri. Anytime.
And Dave has always been amazing in this. Thank you, Dave.
No worries.
And for organizing it, and getting up early in the morning, Adil and Shivam, appreciate it. And all my clients, truly appreciate it. Without you, we are not there. So thank you. Come back tomorrow. And
thanks, everybody.
Hope you enjoyed the session tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.